I know. Brittany, do you know if we're good with broadcast to start? I think we are. We'll go ahead and call this meeting of the City Plan Board to order. Ms. McMullen, if you could call the roll. I believe we have one member running a few minutes late.
Yes. All right. Board member Ackerman.
Here.
This is an old list. Thomas Hawkins.
Here.
Christian Newman.
Here.
Stephanie Sutton.
Here.
James Blythe.
Here.
Sophia Corrigetto.
Here.
And Jason Hurst.
I think he's just running late.
Okay.
Okay, and then I'll look for a motion to adopt the agenda. Okay, Mr. Newman, anybody to second?
Second.
Mr. Hawkins, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we'll move ahead with this agenda. Next, can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting?
I have approval of the minutes as presented.
Okay, Mr. Hawkins, a second.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Newman, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, approved unanimously. Ms. McMullen, can you read the announcement into the record for us, please?
Yes. Section 30-3.3 of the Land Development Code establishes the Plan Board, including its membership, rules of procedure and functions, powers, and duties. The Plan Board is advisory to the City Commission on most planning petitions. Appeals of Plan Board decisions concerning special use permits are to a hearing officer within 30 calendar days of the decision. See Section 30-3.58C of the Land Development Code. The procedure for an appeal is set forth in Section 30-3.58.
Thank you. And if you'll read our first item under old business into the record as well, please.
Petition PB 21-08 TCH, City of Gainesville, amend the Land Development Code to modify the purpose, objectives, effect, criteria, and procedures for implementation of the Heritage Overlay District. And we do have Adam Carr on the line with us to present on this item.
Okay, great.
Hello. Let me share my screen real quick.
Okay, we have your PowerPoint up, it looks like.
Great. All right. Good evening, Chair and Plan Board members. I'm Adam Carr, GIS Analyst for the Department of Sustainable Development, and we'll be presenting on Legistar Item 200729, Heritage Overlay District Text Change. If you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to stop me, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. First, a brief review of prior activity on this item. Back in August, the City Commission had a meeting where a variety of topics related to equity and equitable development in the city were discussed. The Commission passed a 16-part motion that contained the beginnings of a move to update text in the Land Development Code pertaining to the Heritage Overlay District. At a Commission meeting last October, significant discussion on a proposed building moratorium took place. A moratorium was not passed, but direction was given to staff to continue work on various equity projects, including this text change. During 2 meetings in November, the Commission dealt specifically with the Heritage Overlay District text change. During these meetings, there was general consensus on the desire to include a neighborhood narrative in the process, as well as the desire to have the Development Review Board handle the review of regulated work items and to change the name of the Heritage Overlay District. In January, a brief presentation on this item was given to the Plan Board to have preliminary discussion and provide input on potential changes to the text. I wanted to provide a little bit of additional background information on the district and show examples, show samples from the current text before digging into some of the proposed changes. So the Heritage Overlay District is a tool neighborhoods can use to ensure future development has a similar style, character, and identity as what can currently be found in their neighborhood. It is meant to encourage neighbors to be involved in the land development process in their area. It focuses on architectural and aesthetic characteristics of future development. It could be considered, it could also be called like a historic district light. It's a little less restrictive on various aspects of development compared to the historic district. And then the underlying zoning district for a property is not changed when a heritage overlay district is applied to it. So here's a sample of the current text, and just highlighting some key portions of the purpose and objectives of the heritage overlay district. So there are some challenges with the current text. As it stands, heritage overlay district has never been created, though it has been, this opportunity has been present in the code for about 10 years. There are limited property types where an overlay district could be applied, preventing it from being implemented in areas that may feel the need for having it. And this is determined by a property zoning district, whether or not it can be applied there. A heritage overlay district board would need to be created in order to review any stipulated regulated work items. It's overly burdensome on the community to create a district with significant financial and technical resources required in the process, and little to no staff assistance is outlined in the code currently. And then lastly, there are too many potential regulated work items, which could make a heritage overlay district feel pretty similar to a historic district in some ways. So here are some examples from the text, or of these challenges from the current text. So first, just wanted to highlight the requirement for the board to be, and in this case, it would need to be created because it isn't presently established. And then also the zoning district limitations. So property has to have RSF 1 through 4 or residential conservation to be eligible. Here is some language associated with the technical requirements that I mentioned. And this is specifically related to the design standards report, which is a key feature of the Heritage Overlay District application. And then this is the current list of regulated work items that could be included in a heritage overlay district. And I just wanted to note that things like fences and then windows and doors and garage doors might be a little too granular for the overall goal of the heritage overlay district. So here are some goals for updating the heritage overlay district text. Seeking to create a greater focus on establishing heritage overlay districts in historically disenfranchised communities facing development and displacement pressures. Also increase city staff support for implementation of heritage overlay district. Allow the city commission to nominate areas for designation, and this would be in addition to the regular process of a neighborhood creating a heritage overlay district for themselves. And then streamline the list of potential regulated work items. So here are some more of the specific proposed changes to the text. I'll go through examples of the proposed changes after this slide. So first is include a neighborhood narrative process in the implementation of an overlay district. Then establish an eligibility map to focus the implementation of a heritage overlay district on key areas of the city. No longer limit an overlay district to single-family zone properties. Provide greater staff assistance in the process. Alter voting requirements for approval of an overlay district, so no longer have it limited to just homesteaded property owners as it is now. Increase the threshold for approval when voting for a heritage overlay district. Add demolitions to the list of potential regulated work items, and also, like we kind of mentioned, remove some of the items currently on the list. And then select the Development Review Board as the designated reviewing body for regulated work items. So now I'll go through some of the samples from the sample changes. And the next few slides will kind of be in this format, showing existing text on the left and highlighting some of the pieces to be removed or proposed to be removed. And then on the right, showing proposed additions and highlighting some key points. So here is the proposed removal of those zoning districts, and then adding in the eligibility map criteria, and then a completion of a city-sponsored neighborhood narrative. Here, just highlighting the addition of additional staff support, particularly in the development of the design standards report. Here, just showing some changes to the approval process for an overlay district, removing this portion down here where only homesteaded property owners could vote, and then showing adding a 2/3 majority for approval, and then also any property owner as well as long-term residents in the proposed area would be eligible to vote. And then lastly, here's showing some of the proposed removals from the existing list of regulated work items, and then adding 3 new things, but overall cutting the list of regulated work items almost in half. Okay, so almost at the end, but here I just wanted to summarize some points from the prior discussion and member input from the last plan board meeting where this item was presented. So there were some questions on criteria for implementation of a heritage overlay district. And one area that I wanted to clarify was the spatial relationship of a potential heritage overlay district and historic districts. So heritage overlay district cannot overlap with a historic district. And so this is the map from the previous meeting. And I have an update to it that I'll show momentarily. But I just wanted to highlight that. So these 5 areas show the current historic districts in the city. And then the light yellow is was the old or previous version of the draft overlay boundary. So wherever these overlap, there could not be a heritage overlay district. I didn't want to kind of, punch out those historic districts in case there's some change to a historic district if it enlarges or something. So, but I just wanted to clarify that. So and then as on the topic of the map, there was some input given that the map was a little too small and limiting. So an alternate version was produced, and I'll show it in a moment, to expand it a little further west, north of the University of Florida and west of 13th Street. Then there were some concerns that development in the city's core could be inhibited, especially as it pertains to affordable housing. And though this could be possible, staff hopes that with increased community involvement through the neighborhood narrative process and paring down the regulated work items list, this challenge or this sort of challenge would be mitigated. And then lastly, if we received input that if the name was to be changed, that it should be kept simple. So with those things in mind, staff would recommend that the board discuss and provide feedback on the changes presented. And in the agenda item, there were kind of 4 questions or 4 areas for discussion that could be fleshed out. So first, I guess we can cover the new eligibility map. So here you can see in the gray hatching, that was the initial staff recommendation for the heritage overlay boundary that was provided. And then in the purple, you can see kind of what we thought the plan board recommendation was more in line with. So we can give thoughts on that. Next, who should participate in voting on adoption of an overlay district? As mentioned, staff recommends including all property owners as well as long-term residents. And that means we're recommending that means someone who has lived in the area for at least 10 years. And that can be verified through utility records as well as lease records. So then next, regarding the threshold for approval, staff recommends moving from a simple majority to a 2/3 majority. And then last was the overlay district name. So based on comments from the commission, and it seems like there's a desire to move away from this, the current name of Heritage Overlay District. So in hopes of keeping it simple, staff proposes Neighborhood Overlay District, but any other input on that is welcome. And well, that's the end of the presentation. If there's any other input or any other recommendations, please feel free to provide it. I can leave this slide up so you can reference the map, and I'm also happy to go back in the presentation if desired. So.
Questions for staff on this? Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had one question for Mr. Carr. Does the 2/3 majority, are you thinking that would apply both to a citizen petition and to a commission initiated process, or just to the citizen petition?
I think it would be for either process. Although I could see, I mean, if for a commission initiated process, that would probably look a little different, and perhaps we need to, contemplate some, I don't know, revised process for that. But I think at least initially for both processes.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff before we have general discussion? Mr. Ackerman?
I just have a general comment that I'm a little confused about. The initial concept that was described a moment ago was that this is intended to enhance traditionally overlooked neighborhoods or neighborhoods that have been in some fashion disadvantaged. I'm a little puzzled how that would include the westward shift of Gulfview and Hibiscus Park and University. None of those seem to be historically disadvantaged, or and probably at least a big chunk of the duck pond that would also be true. So that's got me a little puzzled. I am very concerned about the effect this would have on the long-term ability to reestablish affordable housing in the core of the city. And I'd welcome your comments, Mr. Carr.
Okay. Yeah, I think in terms of the map, the initial staff recommendation that is still presented in the hatching. Yeah, I think that was kind of more focused on perhaps outside of the Duck Pond neighborhood, like you mentioned. I guess more concentrated on some of those neighborhoods or areas of the city that that were kind of near the core and seem to be experiencing some pressures from development. Based on some of the comments provided during the meeting in January, the planning board meeting, we expanded the overlay the boundary. But so that I guess that is the answer to your first question. And then regarding development of future housing in the city's core, I suppose that some additional language could be added that would, I'm not sure, offer some sort of grace for developments that have affordable housing, but I'm not, I think staff could come back with maybe more suggestions on that or other ideas if the board would find that useful.
Ms. Coronado?
Thank you. Yeah, my thoughts are kind of in line with what Member Ackerman is saying, because I too was trying to wonder, like, I think initially, evidently the intent of this overlay is to protect like the design and architectural standards. But I'm also wondering, you know, if the intent is, because I read some language about, you know, neighborhoods experiencing rapid demographic change, for example. So if this is more so intended to maybe protect against things like gentrification and stuff, does the language currently do that? And I would argue that in some ways it doesn't, you know, because I think with some strict design standards that might be difficult, and again, it could be difficult for people maintaining homes or people who maybe want to build affordable housing. So I would also be in support of maybe adding some language about either incentivizing affordable housing or relaxing certain design standards, just so that people who are currently in these overlays aren't maybe under pressure to keep up with that. It might incur a bunch of code enforcement liens or something because they're not up to code in that way, just so that the intent is not just to protect the kind of architectural standards, but the people as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think those are good points. I guess I will say that the, you know, some of the potential regulated work items are, less focused on the use of the property, and they are more explicitly related to aesthetics. So hopefully there wouldn't be too large of an impact on, you know, making future development that is in line with what the neighborhood is kind of looking for too difficult. But I totally understand the point that you and Member Ackerman are making, and I think it's a fair point. And it is also somewhat, I guess, a limitation of this sort of district in that it's focusing on, you know, the aesthetics, and less on the use. But yeah, we can certainly look to see how this sort of concerns can be addressed in the text change.
So we have a couple of lights, but I'm just going to jump in with one quick thing. We saw, you know, obviously there, as related to costs and affordability and sort of adding some barriers for people who may want to be improving their properties in these areas. There's a cost to get the heritage overlay, but then if we're expecting it to go to a board like DRB, are they going to have to pay an application fee for that as well? Is staff going to have to approve this and have a staff report? Like, that's all cost and time, and all of that adds expense. It goes in the opposite direction of making something affordable. So I don't know if we've given that any thought. Is there going to be a fee for any time someone wants to do one of these things and take it to the DRB? I mean, I believe there's a fee to go to the Historic Preservation Board. So I imagine it would be similar.
I'm not sure, if we've actually, I don't think we've actually had that discussion yet, as far as I know. Adam, maybe you can let me know if you have.
No, I think that's accurate. I think that hasn't been laid out fully.
So it's definitely something to think about, and I think it has a negative impact on affordability.
Sure.
But I also don't think, you have a public hearing and advertise things and all of that for free. So I have a concern about the process. I have a concern about the time required, the technical requirements we're putting on individual homeowners to submit these applications, not just for the district, but for individual work that they want to do moving forward. So I have a lot of concerns about just being an onerous and expensive process. We have some other lights up here. I think Mr. Hawkins, you were next.
Madam Chair, I had a question for Mr. Carr, but what you just had has my mind thinking a bunch of thoughts. But I'll ask the question because I think it fits together, which is, why are we looking at the DRB to be the entity reviewing these sort of design standards that we might come up with, instead of the Historic Preservation Board, who looks a lot at design of small-scale structures?
I think perhaps that was kind of based on some recommendations given by the City Commission. And I guess also with the trying to pare down the list of potential regulated work items and make it a little less, I guess, focused on those small scale aesthetic things, and I guess more on kind of broader aesthetic and architectural principles. But so I guess it was kind of just based on some of that, some of those recommendations provided by the commission.
That's a good answer. Thank you, Mr. Carr. My thinking is that it would be easier for the Historic Preservation Board to make these kinds of decisions than the DRB, simply because these decisions are much more similar to the kinds of decisions the Historic Preservation Board already makes, but also to share Sutton's point. If you go to a Historic Preservation Board meeting, a lot of homeowners represent themselves. There's very much a culture of informality because of that. Building contractors do a lot of the representations. Sometimes contractors come, but I haven't been to, I've only been maybe a dozen Historic Preservation Board meetings in the last decade, but I never see EDA, CHW, right? It's not the same as coming here or coming to the DRB. It's a much more lower stakes. You don't have to hire an engineering firm in order to get in the door. Not that you have to hire an engineering firm to get in the door here, but you're outgunned if you're not. So that would be my recommendation, is that these things are better suited for the Historic Preservation Board. They look at single family homes all the time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And
thank you.
Anything else?
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sophia, I think. Number 4. Oh, Mr. Hirsch, sorry.
What were some of the arguments against the heritage overlay name?
So I guess it was posited that the word heritage in the southern U.S. can have a pejorative context. And I think that was largely it, is that, and I think in some cases it's, used in perhaps a pejorative context.
Okay, Mr. Newman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess when it came to, in front of us previously, to Mr. Ackerman's sort of question, I think I understood this to also be about potentially empowering neighborhoods who want to maybe have a little bit more involvement in what's going on in the neighborhood, an opportunity to put some overlay district on that, you know, that they would be, there'd be a little more participatory opportunities, and that essentially where they could kind of frame what they may or may not view their neighborhood to sort of be and influence that. So I think that was also part of the reason why, you know, there's a lot of change and development pressures, you know, going on the west side of 13th, and, you know, a lot of those neighborhoods are concerned about, you know, some of those changes, and this might be a way for them to, you know, put a neighborhood overlay district on that. So, yeah, so I guess that, I mean, just from our previous discussions, I kind of thought that that was kind of the point of this too. Yeah, and so, and I guess, you know, the other thing too is, and I just, maybe this is a question, is like, some of the things having to do with the regulated work in terms of establishing building heights and all that, square footage and all that other stuff, is that all gonna be sort of driven by what happens with the neighborhood narrative? I mean, is that how that is all defined through that process? And so who is going to, you know, come up with what those standards are for potentially what that regulated work is? That's another question that I have.
Sure. So for I think the neighborhood narrative was kind of intended to be almost like a prerequisite for, not necessarily a prerequisite, it's kind of all part of the process, but it was meant to be more of kind of getting an understanding for what an area means to that neighborhood, or what a neighborhood means to the people that live there, in more of a, I guess, a general way. So the Porters community, with the assistance of, or with partnerships from UF, they, you know, produced a neighborhood narrative, I think in 2018, that was quite extensive, and it was a year-long process, but it really allowed people in that community to come together and kind of get an understanding for what that area means, to the people that live there. And I think that was kind of what the commission was looking for with before completing the more technical aspects of a heritage overlay district. So for people to kind of get a feel for what they want, and then kind of that would be supported by city staff. And then after that process is completed and there's just a greater understanding of what people see in their community, then kind of progressing to the, I guess, the more technical side where, those topics related to regulated work items, again, with staff's help, could be kind of laid out with the context that was provided by the neighborhood narrative, and kind of getting a feel for what they want to see, what that community wants to see moving forward.
I guess my thought with following up on that with the neighborhood narrative is, you know, really, essentially, what we're talking about, providing a board to make decisions on applications. And I'm jumping ahead, but that's where we want to get to, right? People have to present applications for work they want to do on their house, or, you know, adding an ADU or whatever. Once, you know, somebody wants to tear down an old house and build a new one, we want them to have to present an application and meet this criteria. I don't know that you get that criteria out of the neighborhood narrative. I don't know that you get roof pitch and materials and style of windows and all of these things, like, and I'm not an expert in this, you know, I'm sitting next to an architect who can probably speak better, but I don't think that you get those specifics that the Historic Preservation Board relies on in the historic districts out of these neighborhood narratives. And I get it. I get wanting to protect these neighborhoods. I can't help but wonder if a better way for the city commission, because, you know, obviously this is, you know, coming from their direction. I think a better way for them to meet their objectives might be to go back to like a special area plan, rather than this. I think this is really onerous on homeowners. I think the process is expensive and long and difficult, and as we've seen, this has been in the code and no one's done it. We're trying to make it easier, but I don't think we're really accomplishing that. We're telling them that the city's gonna provide support, but the planning department isn't very well staffed right now. I just have a lot of concerns about this big process we're proposing for people, and if the city commission has concerns, and I think that there are areas of concern, maybe we need to look at it in more of a special area plan way than this. So I feel like it's onerous, and I feel like it's gonna be a lot of work on people, and I don't know that we're gonna actually see anything come out of this, similar to the Heritage Overlay District that we've had in the code. We haven't seen anyone do it, and I don't know that these improvements get us there.
One thing I wanted to add is, sorry if I wasn't clear, but there is the design standards report that still has to be completed, and that is kind of, I guess, where the the really technical details related to the work items is laid out. But yeah, I mean that it still is not necessarily an easy process to complete that design standards report, which.
That's not necessarily something a lay person could do. I wouldn't feel qualified to do that, and I have an engineering degree, but I would want to hire an architect to do that for my neighborhood, and there's cost to that. Mm-hmm. So that's my concern, is it's onerous on people in neighborhoods. Mr. Newman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, and I think that's an interesting sort of idea, maybe going another direction, because again, as I kind of look at this and I look at the regulated work items, probably the biggest issue is the thing that why a neighborhood might want to do this is because of demolitions in whole or in part. I mean, that's what they're concerned about. So, I mean, if that's what's concerning, you could have this, and then that could be the only regulated item. I know that's kind of probably a little bit extreme or ridiculous, but that's really, it seems that that's really the potential sort of concern around some of these changes. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know.
Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a lot of thoughts. I want to say them in a way that's organized. One is I think that I have a lot of overlap and agreement with the points that you're making. I am not. One way to interpret your comments is that maybe we shouldn't have something like this, sort of similar to Member Ackerman's comments, that it will increase the process to make changes to physical structures in a heritage overlay, assuming that we get one. I think overwhelmingly that that's countered by an interest in doing exactly what Member Newman describes, engaging people in community, accomplishing the intents of the City Commission and asking us to look at that. Looking at neighborhoods like what's happening in the southeast around Depot Park, looking at neighborhoods like what's happening at Borders, looking at our neighborhoods like the Fifth Avenue neighborhood, that residents truly feel are being gutted of what they valued for generations. And I don't think that we can take any actions that stop gentrification. I don't think we can take any actions that completely prevent conflict between folks, but I think we can make it better. I think we can have process that makes us more thoughtful, that more helpfully engages community members, that protects them from some egregious changes with transaction costs that are really pretty minimal, right? I think, again, I think the standard of comparison is the Historic Preservation Board. And I really think that it's not an onerous process. A lot of things are approved at the staff level. When they go to the board, it's generally pretty smooth. There's a reason I think that the neighborhood between Innovation Square and campus, where we've got a lot of multifamily development, kind of north of Sorority Row, everybody's been talking about, is a neighborhood that has changed over time in a way that has kept it as an extremely valuable community, right? It's nothing like what it used to be. But it's vibrant, it's beautiful, it's got a mixture of homes and multifamily, it's got commercial on its edges, and it works well. And I think that the existence of the Historic Preservation Board and that being a district is really what got us there. And so I think that there's a way we can do this to get a better result than losing what gives the city of Gainesville so much value, which is the built things that we have character in, that have character that we care about. So that's sort of like my big kind of philosophical thing. I did have some specific comments that I wanted to make, and I've got them numbered, so I'll be super brief. One is, I think on the list of items to regulate, I would suggest 2 changes. One is I think roofs should be eligible. Roof lines make a huge difference in the character of a structure in the neighborhood. I think that should be eligible on the list. If the design report finds it significant, I would love to see it included. I'm interested in hearing what everybody thinks about fences. I think fences would be appropriate, but would sort of defer to the judgment of the group. The second, looking at page 5, in paragraph E, this is where I think I have a lot of overlap with you, Madam Chair, is on page, this is the paragraph where we list the process for the community to implement this. And I absolutely think that there's a couple things in here that are confusing and probably pretty onerous. So I think, totally unscientific opinion, I think the reason we've never done a heritage overlay is because we require so much community input on the front end, and no neighborhood has gotten around to doing that in the last 10 or 11 years since we've had this in place. We shouldn't make that mistake again. So if we want to require something like 2/3 signatures, that shouldn't apply when the city initiates it. I prefer we not require that at all, but when the city initiates rezonings, we never have a standard of getting consensus from folks who are regulated, right? We completely rewrote the land development code 4 years ago. We absolutely did not have consent of 2/3 of the people whose property was affected. That's just a super atypical thing. And the biggest, I think, note of confusion here is I don't know how we measure 2/3, right? We need if you're gonna have 2/3 of something, it has to be compared to a whole. So is that 2/3 of, how are we gonna count all the property owners and all the residents to the extent they're different? That's super challenging. Is a family of four residents, or is that one resident? I don't know how we would calculate that, and so if we're going to keep something like that, we need to be really explicit about how it's measured, or I would suggest we take that out altogether. If we do keep it, another change that I would propose is that we refer to addresses, not parcels. So for example, if you have an apartment building with 10 units, it's going to be one tax parcel, but there's 10 residents, right? So we're kind of using terms that don't correlate well with one another. So those are changes that I would suggest making to paragraph E3. To be really clear, define the denominator, use addresses, not parcels, and don't make this apply to the city commission if we make it apply at all. And then the third set is on the same page, and the paragraph right above. Just for clarity, I would suggest we use a word other than unique. What I jotted down, because it's used elsewhere in the proposal, is identifiable physical characteristics. On some level, every neighborhood's unique, and on another level, no neighborhood's unique, right? What does unique mean? It's a really difficult term to quantify. And then I have a really short list. I love the name Community Character Overlay. I don't know, what do y'all think? I like the map that we currently have. I agree with Member Corrigato that we should find a way to incorporate concepts about gentrification. If we're not ready to move this forward tonight, that's one area where I think we should look for new language or ideas. But I would be comfortable moving forward tonight if we have a majority who thinks that. And then lastly, I agree with Commissioner Newman's comments on empowering neighborhoods. I really think, I live in this area. I wouldn't be eligible for a heritage overlay because I live in an historic district, but I think we need to do better in land use and zoning in this part of town, and I think this is a strategy that can work. That's it.
Ms. Corrado?
Yeah, just one last thing I wanted to add about the neighborhood narrative, because I saw that document. I mean, it's huge, and I don't know that every neighborhood needs it. So I'm wondering if it'd be possible to either not only make it more concise, but maybe optional for neighborhoods to opt in if that's something they decide that they want to do in the process of hopefully, or if they decide to apply an overlay in their community.
I think, following up on that, I think, trying to lessen the requirements for the neighborhoods is important, because my concern is it's a lot of work on the front end. But I think it has to be a lot of work on the front end to give whatever decision-making board, whether it's the Historic Preservation Board, DRB, whether it's a special board set up just for this, there has to be enough there to give that board what they need to make decisions. So if you think about it, we use the whole land development code. I mean, you have to deal with, we're talking about expanding that even to building materials and styles, and there's gonna have to be a lot of detail to make it so that they can, make decisions appropriately. And I think that's really onerous on these neighborhoods. I imagine, if we move forward, and I'm not in favor of this the way that it's structured right now, but if we move forward, what I would see happening is the city has a couple of areas that they're worried about, and they're going to initiate those petitions and work really closely with those neighborhoods. And then we've had a couple of, neighbors reach out from some of these more western neighborhoods that are concerned, areas with more means. I could see Gulfview pulling together, I can see Florida Park pulling together and putting this together for their neighborhoods. I think we're gonna have a couple pockets on the west, and we're gonna have a couple pockets that the city's concerned about, but I don't think it's an approachable program for your everyday neighborhood that maybe, has a reason to do this. I just think it's too onerous, and so I don't support the current structure. I'm open to sending it back to staff and trying to come up with something that's a little bit easier for people, and thinking through some of the costs and thinking through, I don't see enough about that next step, and that's where I really worry about it, because that's where homeowners are gonna have to interact with this when they wanna change their windows, when they wanna have their roof redone. Figuring out what that process is, what's the cost, what's the time frame, I think that's really important, because that affects people's lives. Mr. Newman.
Madam Chair, the one other thing that I forgot to ask about is, again, this potentially, and again, and maybe there's nothing we can do about it, but a long, and again, sort of a long, let's say, university or sort of 13th, if this heritage overlay was sort of implemented, then all of the high density areas that are being sort of targeted, right along the roads, would potentially sort of fall, into this also. And, what are the ramifications of that? Is that something that we think, should happen? Is there, I don't know, is there some way to, exclude, certain areas within sort of that map? Or would that sort of happen, maybe go through the when whatever process it is, would that sort of be defined?
So it's only certain zoning, I believe, pretty much single family.
Okay, right. That's right.
So it would exclude the transects and some of that transitional mixed use area. And I do think they have to define the boundary really clearly. I mean, parcel by parcel, I think you have to have the boundary so you can define what the 2/3 is. And I think the addresses is an interesting idea, but if you have something, a 10-unit apartment building, does that property owner get to sign 10 times then? Because unlikely, 10 of those people have lived there for 10 years and qualify as the 10-year residents, or do we want one signature for the property owner? I think it might be easier to stick with the parcels than the address, but I think it's an interesting point to think through.
Yeah, and specifically related to that, we were kind of thinking about it where every parcel would basically be eligible for 2 votes. So 1 vote for the actual property owner, the parcel owner, and then 1 potential vote if there's a long-term resident there. And so in the case of there being of it being like a homesteaded property where the owner lives there as well, then they would get 2 votes because, well, yeah, because they own it and they also are the long-term resident. So that was one idea. For using like the addresses, I don't know. We would kind of have to play around with that a little bit, how that would work. Like you were just mentioning some questions about that. But and yeah, related to the outlining of the actual area, it could exclude like parcels up on the road, like on 13th and University, that don't make as much sense to be in that heritage overlay district.
Mr. Ackerman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This whole proposal it's kind of weird in the sense that it has a feel that it wants to turn itself into a historic district, and so we're going to be doing like the Historic Preservation Board and quibbling over, if this is an authentic material or an authentic this or an authentic that. And I don't know that we're attempting to freeze these neighborhoods. I mean, there's probably a few neighborhoods where we want to do that, but I'm concerned that I'm not sure. I guess my problem is I don't think we're reaching what the real concern is, which is, can we preserve this as a community? It doesn't require that I have a specific style house. It requires that it's something different, and none of this, my concern, particularly when I see some of the possible regulatory things like square footage and things like that, it sounds an awful lot like the same thing we went through when we set up single-family districts, which were basically set up to exclude people from coming in. And I think that's the specific thing we don't want to know, we don't want to do. And so what I would, and the vote thing, that's really a problem, I think. I don't really know how you effectively do that. And then I guess my last comment is, well, I was just gonna, to Mr. Hurst, the objection to heritage is, every guy with a Confederate flag is screaming heritage or hate, and we just don't want to be associated with that concept. And I don't know what you name it, but I agree with sort of that. Right now, I'm not going to support the proposal as it is. I hope we'll go back for something else.
Okay, Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question for Mr. Ackerman. Looking specifically at paragraph F1G on page 9, are there things in that list you would suggest getting rid of that would make this more palatable to you? So, for example, exterior building materials. I mean, that might be something that feels more onerous to you, but building orientation less so, or demolitions less so.
Well, I think that if you want me to answer,
Yeah.
I think my concern is that we're turning this into a historic district where everything's going to look the same for the rest of eternity, kind of the way they do in the duck pond and perhaps, a little bit in some of the other historic districts. I'm just concerned that we don't end up, in effect, doing the opposite of what we're attempting to do, which is give people a greater control over the quality of their community, which I'm not convinced. I mean, I guess we're using it as a stand-in, is that, that all the buildings will remain looking exactly the same. And I don't think that's really what we're aiming to do. And yet, if we start doing that, and building height, there's no way for these communities, particularly in our urban core, to evolve in a way that allows these communities to continue to thrive.
May I, Madam Chair?
Mm-hmm.
I think that, again, University Heights South, which is the historic district between campus and Innovation Square, is like the poster child that we absolutely can focus on design, focus on historical character, and transform land uses. Right? That used to be a single-family neighborhood. It's not. It's a multifamily neighborhood. The density probably increased tenfold, but it still maintains this high-quality community character because whenever we built a new building, we paid attention to how it fit with the surroundings in a way that, I mean, I love that example, and it means a lot to me because of how positive I think it is and what a great example it is for what can be accomplished. And is that, how do you feel about it? I am really interested in whether you think that was a failure or whether we couldn't accomplish that again.
If I'm not mistaken, that also had a special area plan. Did it not?
It may have.
I don't know if the planners here remember. I don't think you guys were here with the old code. I'm fairly certain it had a special area plan, and you have some pretty unique individuals there that are driving and guiding a lot of that change.
Yeah.
That you don't have everywhere in the city. I mean, there's an individual in that area that is really passionate about that and setting strong examples and guiding people there.
Yeah.
I don't know that every neighborhood has that when someone wants to redo their roof or add an ADU or change their windows or.
Maybe I'm
It's a little bit different. And that's why I think the special area plan makes sense in areas that are important to the city for various reasons. I don't know that this gets us the same outcomes, to be honest.
What's the difference between this and a special area plan?
Because that's guided by the city, would have all that criteria. We wouldn't be relying on neighbors to find time and come together and, if there's an architect that lives in the neighborhood, great. If not, they're hiring somebody. I think it's just expensive and onerous for the people that live there, whereas the special area plan, if the city commission is concerned about areas, they can target staff resources there. And I think they're gonna use this to do that, but I don't think you need this to do that. So, okay, we've got a couple more lights and then we do need to go to public comment at some point. So I'm gonna take these 2 lights and then we'll go to the public because I think we might have some callers. Mr. Newman.
Yeah, and I guess it's more of a question. So in that example that you gave, but I mean, is that what the, Madam Chair kind of addressed this, is that what the neighborhood, wanted? I mean, was that the outcome that they wanted for that area, or is that driven by like 1 or 2 people to make that happen? And yeah, maybe it looks great and it's a good example of something going on in Gainesville, but I don't know if necessarily that's what some of these neighborhoods are wanting to do. So, and are wanting to have those kind of regulations over. So, yeah.
That area is somewhat unique in that the person I'm referring to owns a lot of property there. So I don't think you have the same thing in a single family neighborhood.
Okay.
Ms. Carvata?
Yeah, so one thing that's just, I guess, ringing in my mind here with, like, the hesitation with kind of moving forward with this, but then, like, discussion about special area plans and, like, the question of are some of these examples of what the community wanted? It sounds to me like, I feel like in this moment we're making decisions for community members who we haven't spoken with, who we're not representative of. And so I think the city is very much intent, like it seems as though the commission is interested in this neighborhood narrative idea, and I wouldn't want to stop them from doing that. If anything, I think the more that those are done, or the more that we hear from these communities, the better an idea we're going to have of, is a heritage overlay a good idea for that community? What details do they want, or do they think should be included? Because at least from my perspective, I don't know that some of these communities care more about the architecture, but they just care more so, I think, about the community members themselves in these neighborhoods not being displaced. And so in that sense, right, a lot of these design standards just wouldn't be applicable. Those kinds of limitations wouldn't be necessary in that neighborhood, or maybe they just need to be written in a different way. So, I think that a lot of this just really comes down to what does that community want, and we don't know that answer right now. So maybe it is best to kind of let the commission, as excited as they seem to be about this neighborhood narrative, move forward on that, and that'll inform how we move forward with this overlay or potentially special area plan idea.
Let's go to public comment and then we'll bring it back to the board because we may hear some other ideas. Okay, do we have anyone on the phone for this item? Like it was popping up a minute ago.
Was toggling the various buttons here. We do not have anybody on the line at this time, Madam Chair.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Okay. Mr. Shepherd, were you here to speak on this item? Okay, go ahead.
My name is Donald Shepherd, I'm People's Representative, and I see that this is like on the HOA. I think that this is taking the rights of the homeowner away from them, of the plans in which they determine to like or dislike of the properties. I also think maybe this would be also put dictations or rules upon the property owner to take and follow those rules. That's exactly what HOA is. I was going to buy a house out to Hale Plantation, and that's what they have out there is HOAs, and you pay into it. Haven't heard anything about money right now yet, and I think that I agree with y'all, Miss Stephanie, that this here would be more of a headache for new home buyers or long-term home buyers that have lived there for like 15 years. They would like be shrugging their shoulders or dropping their head and saying, why did they deal this to us and dictate this? We wouldn't want that. So I'm gonna vote that we don't take and pursue this. That's my decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd.
But I'm all for heritage. I mean, the historical value of our city. So much of it has been disappeared. So if we can bring this historical districts back, I'm all for that, because that's what travelers come to see. When I came here back in '79, I ran through Duffon area and that area over there. I was like, wow, why don't we buy a home here? And then we got talked into buying a house out on the west side. So it didn't happen. But now that I have changes in my life and opportunities, maybe those opportunities will be there. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. Is there anyone on the phone line at this point? We'll check one more time before we bring it back to the board.
No, Madam Chair, there's nobody on the lines at this time. The floor is yours.
Thank you. All right, so bringing it back to the board, we've had a lot of discussion. I don't know if anyone wants to try to make a motion. Mr. Hawkins?
I'm going to try to make a motion, Madam Chair. I'm absolutely open to amendment, so, right, I would love for us to do something, so I'm happy to make changes to this to get it right. It's got 8 parts, and the only thing that I think is complicated that we haven't talked about is part 6, so I'm going to explain it before I make the motion. I think that instead of the process that we have of collecting signatures, we should just make this match our normal rezoning process as much as possible. So the only change that we would have from our normal rezoning process is we would want the community narrative and the design standards. And in part 2, I'm going to suggest we combine those instead of having 2 steps. So I think that addresses a lot of concerns, including yours, Madam Chair. All right, so I move the I move the city plan board continue this item with a request that staff make the following revisions to the draft. 1, let's call it community character overlay. 2, let's combine the concepts of the neighborhood narrative and the design standards into one step. 3, please suggest ideas for addressing gentrification. 4, refer to the Historic Preservation Board rather than the Development Review Board. 5, in paragraph E3 on page 5, remove the phrase unique and instead say identifiable physical characteristics. 6, remove the process described on page 5 in paragraph E3, dealing with collecting community signatures, and instead procedurally make rezoning to a community character overlay comparable to the typical rezoning process the city employs. 7, on page 9 in paragraph F1G, add roof lines and shapes, but not roof materials. And 8, in the same place, paragraph F1G, add fences.
What was the last thing you said?
Add fences. And I'm happy to say it again. Does anybody want to hear it again? You know, a second? No? All right.
So I have a question about the rezoning. If you're if you're doing a private rezoning petition, everyone has to sign it. So are we saying we want 100% signatures? Every parcel is going to have an owner signature? Okay, or city initiated. So 100%. So we're going away from the vote in 2/3 to 100%. Is or the city. Okay. The city. I agree. And that's why I think the list, I have one more question and sort of clarification. The list that you wanted to add the roofs and the fences to, the way that that's written, are the neighborhoods choosing which of these they want to include, or do they have to address all of them? I can't totally tell. It says any one or more of the following.
Yeah, it depends on the design
So
report,
they
is
pick.
my understanding. So this
Yes.
is a limitation of
Okay.
what's eligible.
Yes, yeah. These are the list of things that could be regulated, but not all have to be.
Mr. Newman?
I'm just in terms of a process, that was a lot. Is it, I don't know, board, do we think that if anything, would we want to go sort of, I don't know, potentially sort of line by line in terms of what he's proposing to give feedback on, or do we want to try to package it all together? I don't know, it just seems like a lot to try to make changes on.
We can do this anyway. My thinking of what might get us to consensus fastest is if we got a second on the floor, and then before we vote on it, we went down and everybody's like, strike this one, add this one, and we can kind of look at each other, and if somebody says no, we'll talk about it more. If everybody's just, staring at the person talking, then we're probably cool to make that change. That would be my suggestion.
I do think we need to, I don't think we have enough consensus, and obviously we haven't voted, but I don't think we have enough consensus to move it forward as is. And I don't know that we have enough clarity to make the changes we need to move it forward with changes. So I agree, we're gonna have to send it back to staff. And so I think, Mr. Hawkins, you're asking for people to sort of speak up if there are other elements that they want changed, add it to the list in the motion.
You got it.
Yeah.
And I just want to add that I don't think staff was hoping to have it, moved forward. We were looking for input and could make changes, so that works for us.
I would like to see more clarity, and I know your motion addresses sending it to the Historic Preservation Board, but I would like the staff to think about that actual application process a little bit. Does it mirror the Historic Preservation Board exactly? Like, I'd like to have that process here, or at least presented to us. What is this gonna present for someone, that wants to change their windows, or needs to redo their roof. I want to know a little bit about that process for people. I've never lived in a historic district. So, I don't know. I've gone to those meetings, but I've gone on bigger projects that have interfaced with historic districts and not so much the single family side. So, so it's encouraging to hear that it's an approachable thing to do, but I still want to know about the cost and the time, and the process for people. I think we need to think about what a homeowner's experience is going to be with this, 2 years from now when it's in place.
My motion has a second, I would add that. I'll second it.
Great.
So,
Okay.
Madam Chair, I'd like to amend my motion to add a number 9, which is ask staff to present an outline of the proposed application process for somebody to get something approved in a community character overlay district.
So, and I guess, if, just because I'm not that bright, if you could go through the list.
Absolutely.
And maybe we could then say, okay, yeah.
Would you, Madam Chair, would you like me to go one at a time and pause, or go through the whole list and then stop?
I think one at a time and just kind of look for nods maybe.
So the first item was using the name community character overlay. Number 2 was combining the concepts of the neighborhood narrative and design standards into one step. Number 3 was asking staff to propose an approach for addressing gentrification.
I like that idea, but I think it's a tough fit.
Yeah,
I mean, I think
it's hard.
I'm with Mr. Ackerman that it's what they're trying to do, but I don't know that we get there. But
I think
staff
Ms.
can think about
Corrugator,
it.
I think Ms. Corrugator should call Mr. Carr and tell her about her research that she's doing. Number 4, refer to the Historic Preservation Board rather than Development Review Board. Now, this one we don't have consensus on. I'm happy to, we can have a straw vote and then decide whether to scratch it or keep it, or
Maybe we just ask staff to think about that as a part of the process part we just added and bring us options or something.
okay, so I would amend part 4 to be ask staff to give us some more information about Historic Preservation Board versus DRB, but keep the draft as it is. You like that?
Or do we, are we even, I don't know, is this, is there some concern about having any board?
Or do we end up with neighborhood boards?
Right.
My thought on that is I know we've had even periods with this board where we had, the reason that we no longer have term limits is because we had folks that didn't attend. If it's so localized that you can only draw from a single neighborhood, it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard.
So, yeah, so I guess just maybe for the city staff to come back with a series of options or something to discuss.
My trouble with this whole concept is that I think it misses the mark. And I think the mark that we're trying to address is people who would like to preserve their community, but that doesn't mean checking on the windows and the roof and stuff like that. That's what I think. And if you send it to the Historic Preservation Board, that's exactly what they do.
Yeah.
I don't think you could prevent them from doing that. And it just doesn't feel like this is a vehicle that's going to get us what we want. When I listen to people in Pleasant Street, except for you, and Porters, and I don't get the sense that they want the place frozen in time.
Do you get the sense that I wanted to be frozen in time?
I'm just kidding you, Thomas, like I always do.
I can't tell what you
I cannot
With the
tell you.
masks, you can't tell what's going on.
But this just doesn't feel like the vehicle that is gonna accomplish this. It requires a great deal of effort by the neighbors, and that may you know, there might be a fervor at the beginning, but when I lived in Miami, I started a neighborhood association, and the ability to maintain the energy and to keep that going over a long period of time is very, very difficult.
I agree.
And that's why I kind of like the special area plan concept better. It seems like there's a way that you can better address the issues of trying to preserve a community without getting into it has to have a window that looks like this, because I don't think that's what we're trying to do.
And making it clear enough maybe that which I don't know if we have one yet. I know we're trying to hire a historic preservation planner, but maybe there's a specific planner that if the criteria is clear enough in something like a special area plan, they can make an administrative decision. But, Ms. Carvato?
Yeah, I think for some reason I thought that in one of the slides it said that a heritage overlay board would be created, and I think I'm just getting confused because it says that in like the current language. I guess was the historic plan board, did it used to be called the heritage overlay board? Okay.
No.
I was just kind of throwing that out there as an idea altogether, and I don't know if the city has too many boards or what, but if there were a board, you know, given Member Ackerman's point about what historic plan boards focus is and what the focus might be here, if having a board for that specific purpose would be an option. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Mr. Hawkins?
I was just gonna say, so, I mean, around this, I mean, so what item we?
We just finished 4.
Number 4?
Number 3, number 4?
We just finished 4. We amended 4.
Right. So, yeah, so we're talking about, you know, what about this, you know, board issue. So is there, yeah, I guess I think we kind of, the last thing we sort of came to is like, well, let's see if we can throw it to staff to see if they can sort of come up with ideas, and the plan board member, Ackerman, you know, mentioned again this, like, well, is a special area plan, which Madam Chair has sort of talked about, is that a better thing? Do we want this, the city staff to think about that?
What's the difference between a special area plan and this? I don't know what the difference would be.
So I think it's remarkably similar to a city-initiated one. I think the city planners are doing the work at the direction of the commission, or maybe, you know, us, if there's a community that's concerned that comes to us. I think it's codified and not just in a neighborhood document somewhere, so that a building department official can reference it. I mean, it's in the city documents. I don't think these neighborhood narratives are going to become a part of official city documents in the same way a special area plan would.
The draft says that the design standards would have to be adopted with the ordinance, and state law says our land development regulations all have to be codified together. When I hear what you're saying, I hear you describing the direction that we're going.
I think the city-initiated process, and that's what's hard about this to me, you know, and I'm saying, I think the city's gonna initiate it in a couple areas they're concerned about, and then there's some areas that maybe have neighbors with expertise, you know, we've had some of them write to us, architects and things, you know, that are interested in doing this for their neighborhood, and so that may happen in other parts of the city. But, you know, as far as like even having a map, like at that point, do you even need a map?
No.
You know, I don't know if we need a map. I mean, I do think it becomes sort of an HOA in some of the areas of means, and it may become, you know, to some of what Mr. Ackerman was saying, a way to intensify maybe some of the things that the commission doesn't like about single-family zoning. I think there's an easy way to make interpretations in your narrative to intensify single-family zoning instead of doing the opposite. It's very easy, looking at this list, to do that. And who's to say, if the neighborhood has voted on doing that, that they can't? You know, so this doesn't So I think that's some of what Member Ackerman was getting at, is that, you know, if they say, you know, we're gonna have a building square footage, and we're gonna have, you know, you've gotta, you know, provide parking, and it's gotta be here, and it's gotta, you know, it's gotta be paved, and it has to be buffered by this, and, I mean, you can add a lot of expense and things to people and really intensify single-family zoning and HOAs, for neighborhoods that want to do that. And I don't think that's gonna happen everywhere. But it's gonna create some disparity. Which there is in the city already, right? I mean, neighborhoods have disparities, and HOAs, you know, can intensify that, because of rules like this. So, I don't know. I mean, I struggle with it. I think the special area plan spoke a lot more to building form, standards, material, echoed some of the historic district, you know, look at, like, getting a look and feel of that area. But I don't think you can do that on this map broadly. And if the city's interested in specific areas, I think they should be looked at in that way. And I think staff should be involved so that we're sure that what's presented and codified covers everything that we need it to. And that we don't get intensification of maybe some of the things in single-family districts they don't want.
I think everything you say makes sense, and the whole purpose of the neighborhood narrative and the design standards would be so we would thoroughly investigate all those issues, have it come before this board, and then have it go before the city commission. And, you know, I'm not going to pretend our process is perfect, but it's at that second stage that we would ask, are we getting what we want or not?
Is it their right to change what the neighborhoods come up with for their narrative and what they'd like to see?
Oh yeah, it's just, I mean, the city commission's ordinance. They don't do what we say. They don't do what applicants say. They don't do what the public say. They do what they want to do all the time. God bless them. I love all 7 of them.
I mean, I think, I agree with you, with what you just said, and I think you could have a neighborhood, you know, and some of the people who've emailed us, you know, could work really hard on a narrative for those neighborhoods and come to the city commission and be told, no, we don't like any of what you came up with for your neighborhood. Sorry.
Yeah.
And I don't like that idea. So is it up to the neighborhood, or is it up to the city commission what the standards are?
All the ordinances are up to the commission.
So I think that's gonna make it, I don't think we're gonna see neighborhoods bring this forward.
Yeah,
And if the city
agree.
wants to do it, I don't think we should have something in the code that, just lays out an onerous process for a neighborhood that wants to do the same thing.
So, I agree with you.
I
I've
think
been
the city
saying
should just
for
do it.
years that the city should just do this, but a minority of the city commission said they wanted to do this, and a majority said, well, let's overhaul our heritage overlay, and now we've got this referral in front of us that they put at the very top of the list that they want us to send back to them.
I don't think it's the right answer for what they're trying to do, and I think that's what we're hearing.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, item 5, what are we talking about again, sorry?
Is that
Yeah.
still a process that has value? Do you want to finish the list? I still think it works. I don't know, maybe we can get 4 votes. Do you want to finish it?
I mean, we get to review it again after they come back to us.
Yeah.
And this is just kind of like one more step forward, you know, whether it's the right step or not, it's still something to look at.
But before I do number 5, a member of the public text messaged me to let them know that all they can see at home is the map. I shouldn't tuck my text during the meeting. It's not somebody who's on our agenda. Number 5, in paragraph E3 on page 5, strike the word unique and instead say identifiable physical characteristics. Number 6, also on page 5 I'm sorry, I had that wrong. It wasn't paragraph E3 for the last one, but that's fine. Do you have that, Ms. McMullen? for the minutes that I made a mistake on number 5. I gave the wrong paragraph reference.
What was the correct paragraph reference?
The correct one is E1, not E3.
Thank you.
Number 6, for the process listed on page 5 in paragraph E3, remove that process and instead treat a rezoning to community character overlay procedurally like we treat other rezonings in the city. Number 7, on page 9 in paragraph F1G, add roof lines and shapes, not materials. Mr. Newman doesn't like roofs. Somebody else not like roofs?
The roof piece, you know, again, if you can opt in or opt out, could be tricky. You know, if most people in the neighborhood have gable roofs and you've got a couple modern houses with kind of a flat roof, it could set up you might have to have very specific rules for individual houses or structures. I think there's some merit there. I just have no idea how to tell you that should be a consideration.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important characteristic of a house. So it may, I don't know. I mean, if we get a chance to look at this again, I think it's a worthy item to have on the list. I just have no idea beyond that. So I think it's worthy, but
I'm gonna leave it, and we'll see what we get when we get it back. Number 8, add to that list fences. That's it.
And then you added a number 9, I believe.
Did we add a number 9?
Yeah.
The process.
Oh, thank
stuff,
you.
The
which
process.
we kind of combined, I think, back with 3 or 4. They were sort of related to where it would go to the board.
Right.
Is staff clear on number 9, and is the board clear on what number 9 is?
I can read you what I have written down.
I'm gonna need Ms. Sutton to restate part 9 of my motion.
I think it just has to do with directing staff to give us more detail on what this process looks like for a homeowner once they are in one of these districts. What's the cost? What's the time frame? What's the process to replace your windows or change your roof or put up a fence in your front yard? What's that process for an individual? Including what board do you go to if you go to a board? Are we establishing a new city board? All of that board discussion, I think it all wraps together.
So number 9 is answer all the questions.
Make it cohesive and make sense. Well, you know, one of the other questions I ask on the voting thing is it 2 blocks? Is it 3 blocks? Is it 10 blocks? Is it 1 block? Is it you, me, and my neighbor? That's what.
A minimum
Sure.
threshold.
So,
Yeah, so my proposal is we strike all that complicated stuff.
well, so in criteria, we had at least 25 compact and contiguous parcels. And it shall not cause the creation of an enclave or pocket.
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest to change that. I wouldn't want somebody to try to use this process to do what they could do by deed restriction, right? It should be because there's some amount of land, and that's a reasonable amount, I think.
How do we feel about the map?
I would rather we cut off everything west of 13th Street.
Do we need a map at all?
I don't think we do, really.
I'm happy to strike the map, but I wouldn't be happy with a smaller map.
I think we heard from those neighborhoods at the last meeting where we discussed this. We heard from those neighborhoods that they wanted to be included, and so that's why we added them. And if you are gonna have neighborhoods do this for themselves and invest the time and the money and the effort, it's gonna be some of those. Because we've already seen it in our emails.
without a map, does it, are the boundaries somewhat flexible then? You know, like, if you have different, do the parcels all have to be contiguous? Like, I'm just wondering what the purpose of the map is. Does it just help focus the energy into like certain areas, or?
Well, I mean, so one neighborhood that's come to mind just since we're sitting here is like, what about like Kirkwood, right? They're kind of surrounded by things that are coming in around them. They're not on this map. I could see Kirkwood doing this. I don't know that Kirkwood would do it for the reasons that the city wants this put forward, but I could see Kirkwood doing this, and they aren't on this map. So if we strike the map, it allows any neighborhood in the whole city to come together and do this for themselves.
Madam Chair, I'd like to amend my motion if the seconder concurs to add a part 10 to strike the map.
Second.
And Adam doesn't know what to say because that's probably why he was given this petition. Sorry, Adam.
GIS.
No worries. Hey, it's a lot easier to make a map if you don't need to have a map. Or to make a boundary if there isn't a boundary.
I mean, I hate to have, like, what if there's a neighborhood on the other side of the street that wants to do this? You know, what if you have, like, I don't know. I think drawing a map is a little tough.
Yeah, as was discussed or mentioned by one of the members, I think, yeah, the idea of having a eligibility map was to kind of focus the energy on certain areas of the city that have been, expressed feeling significant development pressure and displacement pressure. So.
Okay, so now we have 10. We do have a second. Do people feel prepared to vote on this? We've covered all
Madam
that.
Chair, we do have another commenter if you are willing to take it.
Okay, yeah, we'll take it.
Thank you. Dr. Lena Gillis, you have the mic.
Go ahead.
Dr. Gillis? Dr. Gillis has been holding for some time. I don't know if she's still there. I've confirmed that the line is open.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry about that, Madam Chair.
That's okay. We are going to discuss this again if they are listening and watching it online or, somehow distracted and not coming back. We will be discussing this again, I believe. Okay, so with that, we have a motion with 10 parts. Oh, here we go. Are you there?
Yep, Dr. Gillis, we can hear you.
Go ahead.
I'm here, but you can't hear me.
We can hear you,
now.
Dr. Gillis.
Go ahead. We can hear you now. Okay, I think we're having some technical issues there.
We understand she had muted herself.
Okay. We could hear her for a second, but we can't again.
I'm here.
Yep, Dr. Gillis, you have the floor.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, thank you. I've been trying to listen. I'm here, but you can't hear me. Okay, can you hear me now?
We can.
Yes.
Go ahead, we can hear you now. Okay, thank you. I've been listening and trying to absorb, the purpose and the intent for the overlay. And I'm happy that the panel is discussing holding off because I'm trying to. She muted herself.
Can you turn your computer or your TV off in the background?
You have the floor. Okay. Okay, thank you. I've been trying to listen.
You need to turn your TV off, Ms. Gillis.
Okay, maybe I need to turn mine. Okay, are you there?
Yes.
Yes, we
Go
are.
ahead.
I apologize.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm just grateful that you're holding off on going forward with this. I'm trying to get a comprehensive understanding. My company owns property in the Quarters area, and the closest I have ever heard about even the term heritage is a heritage trail, which is a priority for us in the Black neighborhoods. But I'm understanding there's an overlay. How would that benefit us? Is it going to benefit us? Right now, I feel like I'm at the bottom of a fish pond because buildings are going up around my home right now. And so I would love it if people to give us as our community citizens an opportunity to get a comprehensive understanding of what's going on, even the terminology, that you're using. I know if I have to study it, that my neighbors are probably going to have to study it as well. So thank you, first of all, for having an open mic and for allowing me to say this. And if it will benefit us, I'd like to know it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gillis. Madam Chair, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion on the floor with a second. All of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, all of those opposed?
No.
Okay, one no, the rest ayes, and we will have you bring this back to us.
Who was the no, sorry?
Bob was.
Okay, thank you.
We'll have you bring this back to us a little bit more fleshed out and maybe with a couple of options in some of these areas that we aren't sure where we want to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Sorry to strike the
Yep.
map.
No worries. That's what the process is about. Thank you.
All right, moving on to new business. Ms. McMullen, can you read the next item into the record, please?
Yes. Alrighty, petition TB-21-13 TCH, David Coffey, agent for South Main LLC, proposed text amendment to the Land Development Code, section 30-3.14, J4, rezoning criteria to delete the 10-acre minimum parcel size requirement for the owner of a parcel not adjacent to a transect zone to file an application for a rezoning to transect. And we have Lawrence Calderon on the line for this item.
Welcome, Lawrence.
Madam Chair, good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, good evening. Lawrence Calderon with the Department of Sustainable Development. This petition is primarily intended to address acreage size limitation on properties that are not adjacent to another transect zone to have the opportunity to rezone to transect. The applicant is interested in submitting this petition for your consideration because they have two properties they would like to change to transect land use and zoning, and because of that limitation, they are not able to do so. This item was on staff's work plan, but and it evolved over meetings with the plan board and the city commission, but it ranked, say, middle of the list, and we did not have an opportunity to address it. So the applicant, Mr. Coffey, agent for South Main Street, Main LLC, is proposing this text change. So the list of criteria for rezoning is shown on the right side here. But the most important section is J, which talks about rezoning to a transect. And as you can see, there are 4 criteria, and the last one is item number 4, which has a limitation of 10 acres in order for you to even consider initiating a rezoning if you are not adjacent to a transect. And let me explain what that means. if you see this map that I have shown there, you're all familiar with 34th Street and Newberry Road and Southwest 2nd Avenue. I'm using this as an example of how it applies, how the limitation applies throughout the city, and I'll also show how it applies for the proposed subject property. So you could see the roadways, and you could see there's a large residential area to the northeast and a very active pedestrian area, which is the theater, gated dockside. You have some offices on this side, a small shopping center. You have the Westgate Shopping Center over on the west side, and all these other areas here. And so given this, when you look at the zoning on the subject property, what you see is that, my screen is small, so I have to move that down. So what you see is this is the limit of the transect zone. So for example, if this property, which is highlighted here, would like to do a rezoning, because it is not contiguous to the minimum size for this would have to be 10 acres in order for them to initiate a rezoning petition. And as you can see, what 10 acres would be is equivalent to that size area. Looking at this area, it has a lot of potential and characteristics of a transit area. I've shown all the shopping centers, the residential area, but one of the main things that you see in one of those transit area is a public square or park, and we have one right here, and we have a fire station, which is another neighborhood facility that exists. So what the applicant is attempting to do is to remove item 4 as listed here, and maybe substitute some modifications for considering rezoning. So this petition involves these 4 parcels, which are highlighted there. And this is Main Street, Depot Avenue, and the Rails Trail. And what you can see around this area, actually, these are the transect areas about here. And you can see clearly that it is also not contiguous. But you see you have Depot Park and a number of facilities that exist around the area that makes it an ideal area for transect development. The city has spent a significant amount of money in identifying these areas. So if you look at this area, one thing that I call it isolated, because it is separated by Main Street and Main Corridor, it's separated by the Hawthorne Trail, and it's more aligned to the activities that's going on the northeast section of the property. And it's really a dying industrial area. And the amount of activities and intensity of development that's occurring here is very low. And it really it's not an active industrial area. Some of the other features in this area would be Depot Park, which I've seen here, Main Street improvement, which have recently been done and transformed that area, as the applicant will explain to you, into a very nice pedestrian area. We have the Cade Museum sitting right over here. We have the Hawthorne Trail. The bus stop is over on the north side. And you have spotted residential areas within that area zone industrial, as well as around the surrounding area. So the area is actually an area which is ideal for what we call a takeoff into development trends for a transect area. And those features, we have to give strong considerations to them and not focus so much on lot size as the main indicator. Because if we look at the current code, what it says is that if you do not have 10 acres, no way, Jose, you're not going to be even considered. And that eliminates it completely, removing a number of the other significant criteria which are involved in establishing transect and form-based code zoning. So some of the factors that we considered in looking at this petition, I identified 9 of them. and I will run through them quickly. One is that the initial application of the transit was not based on parcel size. And as you can see, if you look at the intent, it says to establish development standards which will encourage a more efficient and sustainable development. The transects were areas based on the following. The city displayed the characteristics anticipated by the transect. The area of the potential, the area has potential to be developed in accordance with the transect, and the area is currently undergoing trends of compact urban type development. And that's what we see occurring in this area. So if we look at the areas in the city when the transect was adopted, you could see in this area between Northwest 8th Avenue and 7th, you can see isolated areas, and these areas are definitely less than 10 acres. You look at another one on South 13th Street, you see another isolated area. And again, just north of the university, north of the College Park, near the College Park area, you could see an isolated transect area which is surrounded by residential. So the initial application did not focus primarily on the parcel size. All of these parcels that I've shown you are less than 10 acres. The second criteria is that if you apply the 10-acre, you leave very little area in the city where you can actually get that size. So this area is shown non-residential land use areas. And if you look, you see the non-residential zoning areas. The two of them, as you can see, coincide closely. But when you look at the overall transect throughout the city, this is what you see. And the areas which are obviously demonstrating areas where you can easily get 10 acres are in the northeast section around this area and in the southwest section. And a large part of that is occupied by the University of Florida, leaving a number of those areas. So in essence, what's happening is that that 10-acre removes a significant number of parcels from consideration when you look at the overall transect placement of or distribution of zoning throughout the city. Removing the 10-acre will be consistent with several objectives of the comprehensive plan, and I have listed a few here. Promote mixed use, establish use categories, urban enhancement, and allowing sufficient acreage to meet housing needs. And even if you need acreage to meet that requirement, if you do not have a 10-acre parcel which is contiguous to a transit, then you cannot implement a lot of those goals. So that limitation is contrary to a lot of those goals. There are examples of smaller than 10-acre parcels that are developed in the city. And one is the 4th Avenue between Southwest 4th Avenue and Southwest 5th Avenue, east of Southwest 13th Street. 4th Avenue development, you can see this is an area that's been redeveloped. It's been approved by the city for development review for a transit type development. And this is an example of what that is. You see wide sidewalks, trees, the type of urban form that you see, compatibility with the adjacent uses in terms of step-down development. And these are the types of development that you can see, and they are developed on less than 10 acres. Another area is the Westgate Publix petition, which we have recently approved in this area between University Avenue and 2nd. And that's another area which is less than 10 acres. And it too has a very pleasant and attractive and urban development that actually meets a lot of the criteria of form-based code and transect type development. The other area is the area considered possesses the characteristics of a transect zone. The historical transformation, which we have discussed, and I'm sure the applicant will go into a large extent on it, is that the city has expended a significant amount of money in transforming this industrial area from a brownfield area to one of the gems of Gainesville. Depot Park is occupied by a significant number of people and pedestrians, and a lot of the activities that's growing around it, that it is trending towards the type of urban form that we are looking for in the city. There's the South Main Street improvement, which has been undertaken by the Department of DOT, and that again is another friendly type development which encourages the transform type development. And again, it's supported by Objective 4.1 to establish use categories that allow sufficient acreage and not to limit opportunities because of acreage only. Standard, I think, is not quite clear because it only applies to zoning and not land use. So one could easily go through a process of a land use change and then find oneself in a situation where we do not know what type of zoning. So we think that it's not a clear and accurate and meaningful criteria that we should be using in order to make decisions on rezoning to transit. The criteria also seems contrary to those goals. Adopt housing regulations that do not unduly limit opportunities. And regardless of what the potential of the property is, if it does not meet that 10-acre limit, then we have restricted or limited that opportunity to provide affordable type housing. Policy 1.5.1, six innovative ways to encourage affordable housing. So we believe that removing the criteria provides a more positive step in our management of the areas in the city to decide how and where we apply transect zoning and not be limited by the 10-acre parcel. 7, we tool, however controversial, and it stands the test of time, and that is sports zoning. And sports zoning addresses isolated parcels, and the courts have ruled on it, and a lot of the literature from the profession has indicated that sports zoning can be used to regulate or remove the development of isolated parcels instead of allowing a limit on it. Zoning regulations based on lot or parcel size do not facilitate affordable housing. And if we look at some of the articles in the literature, Nolan Gray stated, and I would quote, "With land as a major driver of housing costs." And we all know that in a city where you have infill type redevelopment, the cost of land is a significant aspect. And he said zoning regulations that require excessive land could be playing a large role in increasing housing costs and exacerbating shortages. So in our examples of successful development, size was not the most significant factor. And 9, the planning profession and associated literature not specifically size. It's reference, but they do not advocate size. What they do advocate would be the form, the character of the area. And I quote the Congress for New Urbanism, what they have said and how they have addressed dealing with urban form and form-based code. Stuterville, in his article on Great Ideas, the rural to urban transect, discussed the character of areas and not so much the size. As he said, successful development comes in a variety of sizes, and we do not want to limit our ability to regulate land use based on that size. The CNU specifically states, we advocate the restructuring of public policy and development practices to support the following principles. And I need not read this because it's part of yours. Therefore, there is no reference to parcel size when you look at it. So most of the prominent voices on urbanism have not advocated size as a main factor. And therefore, we believe that we should, and we have an opportunity to address it now, that we should be removing this. So that takes us to the criteria 30-3.1 for G1 to 4. And what we want to do is item 1 is to add the blue underline letter, which contains, add to this, which contains redevelopment characteristics and the potential to establish a desirable, coherent expansion of nearby transit. Such elements must include city acceptable street systems with sidewalks, pedestrian circulation, etc., etc. 2, we intend to leave as is. 3, to leave as is. 4, we intend to remove that condition and replace it with the subject parcel currently displays characteristics of a T-zone and the other criteria listed there, and add another major criteria which the profession thinks is a lot more important and stronger in regulating urban parcels would be to ensure that it's not urban sprawl. And so we've added that criteria in there. With that, Madam Chair, our recommendation is that you approve petition PB 21-13 TCH. And the draft recommendation for you is that you move a recommendation be forwarded to the City Commission to approve this petition. And with that, I will attempt to answer any questions. Is it okay to stop sharing now, Madam Chair?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Calderon.
Okay.
Are there any questions from the board for staff? Okay, seeing none, is the applicant here and does he wish to add anything?
Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Coffey.
Oh, very good. Yes, I appreciate that. Well, I would just comment on this proposal. As you can see, I'm representing the Stringfellows, who are the owners of property on South Main Street and have the application that will be considered next for the future land use change and then an implementing zoning in the transect zone. And in order for the land use and zoning to be feasible, it does require the elimination of the 10-acre threshold, or at least a reduction of that threshold if that ultimately is what is decided. When we get to the next two items, I'll give you a little more context for why is it that the Stringfellows would be filing this petition. But after having studied the issue, it's been clear that staff, the City Plan Board, and the City Commission have each identified the threshold as problematic and contrary to the objectives of the transect zoning framework that the city has adopted. And it's actually, after studying it, it's unclear why the criteria that is used to evaluate all other rezoning applications is not sufficient for evaluating T-zone applications, particularly when the T-zones represent state-of-the-art zoning designed to overcome the deficiencies of conventional Euclidean zoning. And it may very well be that it's just politically necessary until the benefits of T-zones have adequately been demonstrated for the community. The applicant obviously encourages the Plan Board to recommend forward to the City Commission a positive recommendation to eliminate the threshold and, if necessary, provide additional criteria that can be used in the future by the City Plan Board and the City Commission to determine when it's most appropriate to approve rezoning to T-zones when it's not adjacent to an existing T-zone. And anyway, so we certainly do encourage you to make that recommendation to the City Commission, and I'll have more to say, obviously, with the next two items, and would be happy to respond to any questions you may have regarding this item.
Thank you, Mr. Coffey. Does anyone have questions for the applicant? Okay, seeing none. That actually sort of prompted a question I have for staff. Lawrence, if you're still available. I agree with this. You know, I think we weren't quite sure what was going to happen with the transect zones at first, and the one thing that comes to mind is if we're doing smaller and smaller pieces, what is going to happen with the public realm piece? And are we going to have inconsistency with where the sidewalks are? And, you know, I know street trees are going to be required and things like that, but the T-zones have pretty strict requirements for sidewalk, building frontage, and the landscape zone widths. And I don't know that that matches up with other zoning. And so I just think we have to be careful. I support this petition, but I think we have to be careful, and maybe it's something that we need to look at more broadly. What happens in that public realm when you have a transect zone next to a non-transect zone? Because I think with this text amendment, we may start seeing that happen a lot more often.
Well, Madam Chair, the transect is new to us, and our experience have pointed to that one criteria, and that's why it was on our work program. But Mr. Coffey has pushed us to address it earlier. We have a process of modifications and waivers and examining petitions that come in for development review in the context of the adjacent and surrounding development. And that's how we have dealt with them. In both of the petitions that we've looked at, we were not able to wholly adopt all of the standards, but with modifications, and in one case, a variance, we were able to move to the type of development that is consistent with the vision for Gainesville.
Okay. I think, you know, we'll talk about it a little bit more on the next petitions, but I do think that it's something, just that public realm, sidewalk widths, what we're doing there, and how it interacts if you have a transect zone next to a different zoning that has a very different build-to line in some cases, is something that I'd like staff to think about a little bit. There might just be some other text amendments that need to go in the other, you know, the non-transect zone zoning categories to make those sidewalk requirements and things slightly more consistent, or in the case of being next to transect, at least make them that way. Because I can see us getting, you know, these like broken pieces of sidewalk, and, you know, in the case of the area that we're talking about, I think we're going to see more of this happening. I think we're headed towards transect zoning in that area of the city. But we have to think about where this applies anywhere. There's a lot of places I can see people applying for transect zoning, but they're, you know, the surrounding properties may be never going that way. And so I don't want to have, you know, one piece of sidewalk out at the road and another one, you know, 10 feet inside of the property. Or, you know, one sidewalk next to the building that's up at near the street, and one, you know, out in the right of way. I think, you know, the planning department does a pretty good job of making that all consistent. But the modifications table in the code is limited in what you're allowed to do. And we might just need to add a note there that allows a little bit more flexibility in those modifications to make the public realm make sense in cases where you have a transect next to a non-transect. But I support this petition. I just think we might need to look at that before it becomes a problem. Any other comments from the board before we go to public comment, if there is any? Mr. Ackerman?
Just a brief comment. At the time that we considered the form-based code, this whole area on South Main Street was originally included in transect zones. Certainly, I think Mr. Calderon's point that the initial decision to create transect zones, particularly along major arterials, was not based on size. And so I honestly don't recall how that got in there, but it's clear that there is the possibility of building good quality developments on far less than 10 acres. And I think Ms. Sutton is correct. This is just the beginning, going down South Main Street of property owners requesting change into a transect. So I support this petition too.
Any other board comments before we go to public comment? Okay, do we have anyone on the phones for this item?
Madam Chair, we actually do. Ms. Tana Silva. Ms. Silva, you have the microphone.
And
Ms.
Ms.
Silva,
Silva, you can turn
should
your
shut
TV
the TV down or internet. Ms. Silva, you need to mute your audio.
Do we have anyone on the phone for this item? Madam Chair, we actually do. Ms. Tana Silva.
Can you hear us?
Ms. Silva, we can hear you, but you have to shut the background audio.
I'm going to. All right. Okay. So I should begin now.
Yes,
Go
we
ahead.
can hear you, but please turn your TV or your computer off, or the sound.
Thank you. I have a few points I'd like to make about this. First, the proposal represents a failure to plan. It disregards all other interests in the area and even the concept of form-based code that we trudged through for 2 years. Not only is it spot zoning, but removing acreage limits encourages spot zoning and bypasses public input in lieu of staff final approval. In this application, it's all for the sole purpose of artificially increasing this owner's property value through upzoning, and Mr. Coffey said as much in January 2020. He also said downtown zoning was staff's suggestion. And 2, at that workshop, the CADE director invited the city to hold community discussions there to plan for the whole South Main area. Depot Park deserves that level of care and collective input. Porters deserves that. The businesses and workers along South Main deserve that. The city's future needs that, not more downtown zoning and expensive apartments and their chain retail and empty storefronts. That area has, as you know, septic tanks, brownfields, and other infrastructure conditions that the public could end up on the hook for a lot of money. For what? For big investment interests to add to the glut of expensive apartments and vacant commercial space. Owners of some of the small businesses around South Main said years ago that they bought their properties to prevent exactly that. They've contributed to cultivating something that's not overpriced cookie cutter products to extract wealth. 3, there's enough downtown zoning for decades to come. How long will those acres at University and 3rd Street remain a vacant eyesore? The boundaries of DT zoning don't need extending, especially if it's not contiguous. Transect zones need to remain contiguous, not be scattered ad hoc, especially with opportunity zone projects on the horizon that Florida Housing Coalition warned can and do overwhelm neighborhoods unless limits are carefully implemented, something no one in the city, I think, has begun. Judicious planning, foresight, and creative thinking about reuse and human scale could lead to amazing results, maybe even for the existing Gray Bar building. 4, please reject this application in total. It's not that the area should never be rezoned. It's that property shouldn't be rezoned haphazardly to benefit owners to the detriment of much bigger public interest. UF and Colliers International are to have influence on planning to the north and east. The public needs to be involved in planning South Main holistically. Otherwise, staff's job is just recommending applicants' wishes and then to approve projects without hearings. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Silva. Is there anyone else on the line?
Madam Chair, there's no one else on the line. The floor is yours.
Bringing it back to the board, I know that these items are all sort of intertwined and by the same applicant, but right now we're just talking about the changes to the rezoning criteria, not about a specific property. So I just want to be sure that everyone's clear on that. Any comments or a motion on this text amendment? Anybody? Mr. Hawkins.
I'm gonna get a timer and see how long I have to be quiet before somebody makes a motion. Okay. I move the city plan board approve petition PB-21-13 TCH.
Second.
Would you mind just adding a note for staff to consider the implications on the public realm when we're gonna have transects next to non-transects?
Absolutely. I modify my motion to ask that staff amend its staff report before the city commission hearing on the item to address the effect on the public realm of removing the 10-acre limitation.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Before you vote, I think we should focus on this is adjusting the criteria for rezoning. The petition still has to come back to you to meet the criteria. And when we do rezoning, we cannot place conditions on there. And we believe that a lot of the factors that were mentioned in terms of streets and sidewalks, they would be addressed as part of the overall criteria and during development plan review and not at the zoning and land use changes.
So I understand that. This isn't the zoning petition that we're voting on right now, it's the text amendment. And so I'd like for staff to look and see if this is gonna create conflicts in the public realm based on the requirements for non-transect and transect zones. It just may require an addition of a note somewhere else if different sidewalk widths are required, which one dominates. You know, how do you deal with the edges of the property and different build-to lines and different sidewalk requirements? I just want us to have a cohesive space. So because this is a text amendment, I'd like you all to look in the code at where those things are discussed in transect zones and non-transect zones and try to make sure that there's consistency. I understand we can't put conditions on the rezoning of a specific property. So, you know, when we get to that, you know, I'm not gonna say this property has to have this sidewalk width different than other properties of that zoning, but I do think as we're talking about the text amendment, we need to think about the implications that it's gonna have. Does that make sense, Mr. Calderon? I'm thinking of, and I don't think we have the code on these computers, but I'm thinking of a table somewhere that says for basically in commercial zoning, you have to have either a 7 or an 8-foot sidewalk, I believe. And I can picture it, and I think it's in the zoning section. I think it's in Article 4 under the commercial zoning where you have to have, and it differentiates when you need a 7-foot and when you need an 8-foot. But in a transect, depending on what roadway you're on, you're either gonna have a 5 or a 10. You're not gonna have a 7 or an 8. And so there's just inconsistency there. And so I'd like to have a note added somewhere of how we're gonna adjust. If you have an 8-foot and a 5-foot next to each other, what's happening at that property line? Or if you have a 7-foot and a 10-foot, depending on what road you're on and what's required by the transect. I don't think that the code's consistent in sidewalk width requirements between transects and non-transects. And I don't want us to have a messy public realm.
Madam Chair, we will look at that. We will look at that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I mean, the street tree requirements and things are gonna be similar no matter what, but I wanna think about the sidewalks. I don't wanna have a mess out. And South Main, I think, is a place where we could end up with that. Some of it was done by the city project. It may have all been handled by the city project there, but these side roads are gonna start to have issues too as this rezoning happens. Okay, so that said, sorry to go on a little bit of a rant there, guys. I think we have a motion and a second. Any other comments, or are we ready to vote? Seeing no other comments, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, carries unanimously. Ms. McMullen, can you read the next item into the record?
Petition PB-21-14 LUC, David Coffey, agent for South Main LLC, request to amend the City of Gainesville future land use map from City of Gainesville Industrial to City of Gainesville Urban Core, UC, located at 1015 South Main Street, related to PB-2113 TCH and PB-2115 ZON.
Madam Chair, this petition is for use change, and the condition is subject to approval by the City Commission of the 13 TCH petition. And it's pertaining to those 4 parcels which we've seen here. And they have been under the ownership of the Stringfellow family for a very long time. And I will leave a lot of the details for the applicant to discuss with you. But let's see, I can't move my, yes. So this is the current land use on the subject property. As you can see on the subject property, it's zoned industrial, and the surrounding area, most of it is zoned industrial, with the exception of the Depot Park, which was part of the city's struggle to improve the area. You see the urban core on the north edge, and the residential low area on the north kind of west side of the subject property. The surrounding land uses are not all transect type zoning. They have a mixed type, which is part of our understanding and commitment that the area has a variety of uses trending towards, mixed use type of development in the urban form. The transect area, as you can see in this subject, in this isolated parcel, is not adjacent to it. But so with that change, if it gets adopted by the City Commission, would be able to have that land use change. But as a matter of fact, you can do a land use change because the 10 acre does not apply to land use. We looked at the historical industrial character of the area. And one thing that's good about the vision that's happening in this area is that we are gradually transforming an intense, dirty industrial area to one that is becoming urban friendly and where people can move around. The cleanup that the city did was a significant step in moving that urban trend forward. You have some of the key focus on there. You have Depot Avenue, you have the Cade Museum, you have Hawthorne Trail, you have the bus stop, and a number of factors around the development that makes it suitable for the change to a transit type to encourage this type of development. Because when we do have this type of development, we are able to provide additional resources or areas for additional housing, which increases the housing supply and then lowers the price of housing to some extent or the other. It's not the panacea to affordable housing, but it is a step in that direction. This is the proposed land use urban core, and the purpose of the applicant's purpose is to capture the umbrella in order to allow for the lower level zoning to facilitate redevelopment and to continue the growth which is occurring in this area. What's happening in the area, when you look at it, you step back and you look at it, you can only have the thought in mind that Larry Sims states is a major feature of transit planning is that it incorporates a variety of residential and commercial space into a single neighborhood, what we call mixed use. And you see that happening in this area just a quick walk and that would be clearly visible. So the criteria for land use changes, according to the Comprehensive Plan Policy 4.1.3, we've established consistency with the comprehensive plan, compatibility with the surrounding area, in the sense that the industrial area is dying and reducing reducing in intensity. And it's not the kind of dirty industry that we have. And while the opportunity exists, we're taking advantage of that. Environmental impacts on the area, urban infill and redevelopment. This is Gainesville, where we are limited by boundaries, and we have to work carefully, cautiously, and smartly when we're looking at urban infill. We have to look at affordable housing. In a redevelopment area, the price of land is a significant element. And that area, with that change, would increase the housing stock and contribute towards the affordable housing. There are transportation impacts. Depot Road is fast becoming a major east-west arterial on the south side. Additional availability of facilities are provided. The city needs the additional acreage. Currently, the amount of acreage that exists in industrial is not being utilized to its maximum effort. And changing that to a zoning or land use that would more efficiently and effectively utilize the land would be a positive step. We want to discourage urban sprawl by encouraging this type of development, which is consistent with 163 of Florida statutes. Strengthening the diversity of the city's economy is another important steps, and we need to modify land use categories and development pattern within antiquated subdivisions. There is no major subdivisions here, but as the parcels are in certain sections, and the subdivision criteria applies in this case. So we are taking advantage of trying to do the aggregation of lots in this area. With that, Madam Chair, our recommendation is for approval of the petition, and the recommended motion for you is follow the recommendation that the City Commission approve petition 2114. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Calderon. Are there any questions for staff on this petition? Okay, seeing none. Does the applicant have a presentation on this item?
Yes, Madam Chair, are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Coffey.
Okay, so if I'm able to share the screen, I'll make a presentation. Let's see.
Okay, we can see your screen now.
Okay, let me try. Okay. Then I just need to, all right, so you're able to see the screen right now?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So again, just for a little context, I am David Coffey, and I am representing the property owners, the Stringfellow family, which, as Mr. Calderon indicated, has been a part of our community since the early 1800s. The city approached the Stringfellows in 2014 with proposals to change the zoning from I2 to UMU and a transect zone. The Stringfellows declined and made it clear that the property is financially sound, producing steady income for its owners, with a national tenant occupying nearly 58,000 square feet of warehouse space in a relatively new building, with many years of useful life remaining for the building and tenants occupying it with no interest in leaving the site. The suggested zoning changes that the city had proposed would only make the existing uses legal non-conforming uses. And for that reason, the owners declined the proposal. And the situation with regard to the occupancy of the site and the existing uses on the site has not changed. The property remains very strong financially, and able to go on indefinitely as it is. But something has changed, and changed very dramatically. What has changed is the character of the area. The area has undergone a radical transformation through an array of thoughtful investments by the city in civic space and the public realm. The transformation that may have seemed like a pipe dream in 2014 is today's reality. It could not be more clear today that the Stringfellow industrial property no longer fits the area. It is not compatible with the walkable, pedestrian-friendly urban environment that the city has invested so heavily in creating. Rather than impede transformation of the area into the kind of high-quality urbanism that the city is fostering, the owners have agreed to pursue a change in the future land use and zoning to help further implement the city's vision for the area. Before initiating anything, city planning was consulted to learn what it recommends, and the direction received was clear. A future land use change to urban core land use and DT zoning, which of course had to be preceded by a text change to the Land Development Code, as you've already discussed. Planning staff was clear that the city envisions extending walkable, mixed-use urbanism to this area and had invested heavily laying the foundation for that to occur through its huge investments in civic and the public realm infrastructure. After receiving the assurances that the existing uses that will be rendered legal non-conforming uses if this land use and zoning change are approved, that those legal non-conforming uses would be allowed to continue, the Stringfellows agreed to proceed with the 3 required applications that you now have before you. So I think it's important to be clear that the owners are not developers and they have no redevelopment plans. The owners are instead simply creating an opportunity for redevelopment of the property to occur consistent with the city's ambitions for the area. It is doing so knowing that the urban core, future land use, and DT zoning recommended by the city provides the strongest potential for an economically viable redevelopment of the site, overcoming the embedded limitations that exist due to the very strong financial performance of the property today, and as it's anticipated for the foreseeable future. A lower land use and zoning designation would not only be inappropriate for this particular site, but is also believed to only create legal non-conforming uses and all the limitations that that places on property, with no real potential for redevelopment to ever occur. The economics of redevelopment of the property does not appear workable with a U9 or lower zoning designation. And for all of those reasons, you have before you a proposal to designate the property to urban core and DT. So you've already discussed the first issue and thankfully moved to recommend approval for that, or have recommended it. And what you have before you now is the urban core land use designation, which you see on the left. And next you'll have the DT. Well, the DT zoning is the only generic zoning designation that can implement an urban core land use designation. And so I'll just discuss both very quickly together. The request is primarily due to the radical transformation of the area by city investments in critical infrastructure. The petitions create an opportunity for achieving fundamental planning goals of significant expansion of housing in downtown, which indirectly promotes affordable housing. It will go from 0 residential units possible to a range of 6, possibly 700, or even possibly more residential units. It also furthers the objectives of the city, favoring transit-oriented development, given its proximity to the hub for the regional transit system, which is less than a quarter-mile walk from the site. And then, of course, ultimately reducing carbon footprint. With regard to affordable housing, which is one of the most intractable problems that the city attempts to deal with, it seems more and more clear that the most direct way for achieving affordable housing stock is through some form of subsidy. And that's primarily how it has happened historically. And what the redevelopment of this property can achieve, of course, is a significant increase in ad valorem revenue, which may be used by the city for the creation of affordable housing. And this illustration, I pulled it off the internet while watching your previous discussion. It's a graph that shows the ad valorem revenue produced based on a per acre basis. And what you're seeing there is in the purple, the highest peaks of ad valorem revenue per acre is occurring in dense mixed use urban space in Atlanta. I believe that that's what this graph is showing you. And how little is achieved out in the lower density suburban areas. This is based on work done by a guy, Joe, I don't even know if I can pronounce his name correctly. Its name is at the bottom of the page there, which the city and the county have both been following and have done analysis of how that works in our community. And it's incredibly clear that dense mixed use development of the sort that the land use and zoning that is proposed for this site will permit will radically, if used, will radically increase the revenues per acre for the city, which it can then choose to use for the creation of affordable housing, having a more direct effect. Well, as we all are, I'm sure, very aware, the transformation has occurred as a result of the development of Depot Park, which has become really an incredibly popular space for residents of Gainesville. And of course, the Cade Museum right next door. But that's really sort of the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more that has occurred that it's easy to lose sight of it. The red line you see here going adjacent to the Stringfellow property, here labeled as Gray Bar, that's the Gainesville-Hawthorne Trail as it's now exists. And then further north here, running along the edge of 6th Street. And 6th Street has been recently transformed, as has also Depot Avenue, which is shown in the yellow dashed lines. And each of these dots represent traffic calming and traffic managing roundabouts. And way over here on the left is the very famous Peanut intersection. And there you see the Peanut and the reason why we call it the Peanut. It's easy to forget what used to be there and what this space was like and how it has since been transformed by investments by the city. The way Depot Avenue looked just a few short years ago, as you see here, and the way it appears today. I actually drove it this afternoon, mistakenly thinking I was going to attend this meeting and present to you, and then learning I can't do that. And on the drive in, I saw without a doubt no less than 100 individuals walking the Depot Avenue corridor simply because it has been improved to be such a comfortable space for pedestrians. And I see that day and night because of the extraordinary lighting that exists on Depot. And if you keep going, there's the intersection with the roundabout. And then if you go north on 6th, there's another roundabout and the kind of redevelopment that that has fostered. Proceeding east on Depot and approaching Main Street, this is the way it looked just a few years ago. And of course, the way it looks today. Looking south along Main Street, the way it looked just a few years ago and the way it looks today. Proceeding further south on Main Street, you see how it appeared before the museum went in and before the massive investment made by the city in South Main Street to change its character to a character that reinforces urban form, and the way it appeared not today, but fairly recently. And when you take a look at it from the air, it's just amazing the amount of investment that the city has made and the response that the public has provided by utilizing all of the space that has been created in the manner in which it was intended. And it's because of all of that transformation that has already occurred in the direction the city clearly wants to take this area, that it became quite clear to the owners of this property that it now is incompatible with the direction the city intends to take the area. And it's time to put in place the land use and zoning that will facilitate the transformation of the property ultimately consistent with the vision that the city has. And as you can see from the air, it's not a very attractive site, not something that is terribly compatible with Depot Park. At the ground level, you see on the right how it faces the street today. The street being very pedestrian friendly and lots of pedestrian and bicycle activity along it. And yet this is what the pedestrian is presented with, all kinds of uninteresting activity behind fences with barbed wire at the top. More images of the kind of urban, very active pedestrian friendly multimodal space that has been created by the city, and what is just on the other side of the fence, clearly inconsistent with the direction the city is taking the property. Along one side, you've got the Gainesville-Hawthorne Trail that runs along its edge, which is very heavily used. And then just a few more images of the character of the area. And then lastly, not often noted, unless you spend time on the trails within Depot Avenue Park, is the character of the space just behind the property and adjacent to the park. And you see here on the right, ground level image on the left, you can see from the air where this picture was taken. And here's just another shot, a more panoramic view. And when I was out there and took this picture, there were loads of pedestrians. I didn't catch them as they were going by when trying to do this panoramic image. But that whole edge there you see on the left is the property that is the issue for the land use and zoning, and the implementation of that land use and zoning would allow for interactive uses, residential and non-residential uses that can interact with the pedestrian and bicycle activity within the park. You can see just from a larger aerial view, it's a real challenge to attract and see redevelopment on a site that is so surrounded by heavy industrial or very unattractive industrial uses. So as Mr. Calderon pointed out, this is the current land use designations, and I've circled the property and the proposed land use before you tonight. I would just mention that in the original conversations with the city, it was made clear too that ultimately the RTS site that is no longer in use would likely also be redesignated urban core and DT zoning. Again, here's your zoning, and again, the same would apply there, but that effort has not yet been initiated. And what you see on the left, of course, is the uses that are allowed in an industrial land use. And on the right, you can see the urban core, which calls for the kind of urbanism that we've been describing. And we've had several neighborhood workshops, and I'll go over what seem to be the biggest concerns, but by far the biggest concern is the building heights authorized first by urban core land use and then by DT zoning. 12 stories by right, 14 through bonus system. That was by far the greatest concern that residents expressed. What's interesting, if you look at the zoning and what it allows on with the current zoning, it does not allow residential of any kind and does allow for all the kind of industrial uses that we see in that whole area. But it also is very permissive for sexually oriented businesses, which clearly is not compatible with Depot Park. And on the right, of course, you see what the DT zoning will permit for the site if approved. The kinds of concerns, as I mentioned, that have been raised at the neighborhood workshops include a concern about the building heights and concern about shadows that if it were built out at allowed building heights, that might be cast on Depot Park. There's also concern expressed about parking and traffic and the potential for high density development, just moving right on down through the rest of Southern Maine, down to Southwest 16th Avenue. And then lastly, a preference being urged upon the applicant to go for a planned use district and PD zoning. And just very quickly, covering each of those very quickly. For the second neighborhood workshop, photo simulations were prepared by CHW to help everyone visualize what that potential impact is, both in terms of the appearance of 12 and 14-story buildings, if it were ever to develop at that intensity, and what kinds of shadows might be cast on the park. And each of the dots you see there are points along the way where perspectives are provided. And what you see in the building pad on the site is a configuration that mirrors what the transect would essentially call for, which is buildings lining the edges of the streets and also lining the edge with the park. And then parking embedded in the middle. So the photo simulations were done to scale to allow for the perspective that one would experience within each of the points shown on that previous map. And so here is a perspective on 12 and 14-story building mass viewed from within the park. Here it is from within the park as well, much further into the park. And again, where it's more visible. And the purpose of this was to allow for everyone to get some sense of perspective on how overwhelming or not 14-story and 12-story building mass might be. And then here is from one additional vantage point, much closer to where the buildings might be, but mostly obscured by that large oak tree. And yet another perspective. And then the shadowing was done to address that concern. And this first shadowing is showing 4 o'clock in October, when the shadows are going to be fairly long at that time of the year. This is in December at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So it was very clear that it represented no real threat of actually casting any significant shadows onto the park itself. I also just happened to notice that this image was one used by the CRA when being considered for an international award for Depot Park. And it shows a vantage point that actually includes the Kelly Power Plant, which I don't know how tall that is, but it's a fairly tall structure off on the horizon. And the city actually did get that award. Parking concerns were raised by residents because, as I'm sure you all realize, that the U2, the transect zones, U8, 9, and DT have no parking required. If you're in U5 through U7, you have none for any non-residential use, but you do for residential. And that's just the reality, that the code does not require it. However, we all know that economics require it, that lenders will not lend on development unless there is parking, and buyers won't buy. Renters won't rent if there isn't convenient parking. And so it does get addressed through market forces. And it is also worth noting that the parking requirements of the transect and handling parking in a way that ensures that it has minimum impact, minimum adverse impact on the quality of the urban environment that we're all trying to create is addressed. And you see that in these chunks of the land development code that were included here. Traffic concerns were raised, and I must say, somewhat difficult to understand, simply because this is a location where multimodal lifestyle is at its maximum potential in Gainesville, with the regional transit hub right within less than a quarter-mile walk. And that walk is either through the park or along Main Street, which is very comfortable. And of course, all of the employment and service needs that can be met within walking distance in the downtown, and an incredibly short bicycle ride to the university by way of the Helix off at the end of Depot Avenue. And so we don't have traffic studies, but it's real clear that if ever there was a place for transit-oriented developed multimodalism lifestyle, this is the site that Gainesville has available today. One other concern that was raised is similar, very dense DT, potentially tall buildings, marching all the way down to 16th. And it's just helpful to know that most of that land moving to the south is owned by the city of Gainesville. And at the very southern end is the sewage treatment plant, which represents a pretty significant impediment to marketable, high density, tall development. as you move south along South Main. And then the final question that we were asked was, well, why not a PUD and PD? And primarily because first, the property owner is not a developer, and the property owner has no plans for development or redevelopment of the property. And normally you pursue a PUD land use and PD zoning when you're preparing to implement a plan, so you know what to put in that PUD and PD. And that is just not the case here. But it is also true that the city prefers to see the transect used rather than PUD and PD. And that's because of the degree to which the city has placed in the transect designations sufficient urban design standards to accomplish what we've historically relied upon the PUD, PD mechanisms to achieve for us. And so for those reasons, that was not pursued. And I think that is all that I was going to show you. And so I would encourage you to approve the staff recommendation, both with regard to the land use and also the zoning, for all the reasons I've suggested and as has been suggested by Mr. Lawrence in his reports. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Mr. Coffey. Does anyone have questions for the applicant? Okay, not seeing any. Do we have anyone on the phone line for this item?
Madam Chair, there's nobody on the phone line at this time. The floor is yours.
Okay. Bringing it back to the board for discussion or a motion if someone's ready. Mr. Bly.
So I have a serious problem with the height allowed. And I know that there's other issues, but I'm just gonna say I have a major issue with the shadows, with the views. So I did want to bring that up. And then I was doubly concerned when I saw that the city may have potentially, you know, wrapping the entire southern end of Depot Park with another DT potential zoning land use change. I don't love the idea that this might set the precedent that then that other parcel would follow. So I was trying to track, and I certainly am a fan of this being developed. I don't want to have that not be clear. I think a mixed-use property there that brings in commercial and residential and ties into everything that's happening there is the right thing. I don't think I is correct. I think it does need to be changed, but I have a major issue with that amount of shade and kind of view corridor blocking happening on that southern end of the park, especially with it wrapping the entire southern end. I mean, if everybody's familiar with kind of how the sun works, it comes from the, you know, kind of the angle of the south. So that entire end is going to be covered, you know, with some kind of shading. During, like, you know, as we mentioned, in the winter time, it's going to be kind of the worst case scenario. But even in the summer, it is going to have, you know, ecological impacts on some of the wildlife and the plant life there, as well as it is going to form kind of a built wall, if you will, to the southern portion of the park. So I did want to ask on that sunshade study, and this is probably maybe for the applicant, or it could be just in general, what are the parameters used? And does the city have any parameters for sunshade studies in terms of defining it or maxing out height? You know, again, I can say, as an architect, I can say this is 11 stories, but each of those stories may not be set at a realistic height for the story, so I don't know if there's a standard for that. Certainly at the 200-foot bonus height, that is up there. I mean, 200 feet is a significantly tall building, especially when it is requiring for somewhere between 90 and 100% site coverage or allowance for that. So again, your available building envelope that can be built is a massive block that can be built there. I know what was presented was not, you know, kind of from a developer, but somebody could come in and construct a 200-foot block that would take up almost 100% of that site. Just for everybody to kind of realize. So again, I am a fan of something happening there, but I have a major problem with DT being what happens there.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to, we have a, I'm going to talk about something that's not related to this petition, but it builds off Mr. Blythe's comment. We have a petition pending before us that the commission referred to staff for a potential code change, I think in 2018. It was before I joined the plan board. I joined the plan board in spring of 2019. And so it's been outstanding for almost 3 years, a little bit less. I think they referred it in the fall. But big chunks of the Pleasant Street neighborhood that are occupied by single-family houses are zone DT, which I think is a problem. I don't think that the uses allowed are compatible with the neighborhood, and it's not. All right, it's like literally next to bungalow, you know, Florida vernacular wood frame homes that are 1,100 square feet. There's DT zoning. In a lot of cases, homes of that character are DT zoning. So when I hear you say that, I just want to bookmark it because I think that your comments, when I hear them, I see them as very applicable to that situation in Pleasant Street. I'm frustrated that the commission referred that to staff for a code change 2.5 years ago. We haven't talked about it yet, but that's not as big as staff. We've got a long list and we're working through it. But I want to bring this up if we ever discuss that. I want to bring up that conversation. For this particular site, the development that I think of is the development surrounding Lake Eola in Orlando. You go to Lake Eola in Orlando, it is not half as pretty as Depot Park, not half as active as Depot Park. We have a jewel that I think rivals some of the best public spaces in the state. And one thing that makes Lake Eola, I think, vibrant and great is it is surrounded by high-density multifamily with ground floor amenities for the community. So I think that I frankly think that multifamily of that character here would be an amenity. We've got DT on the north side of Depot Park. I think this location on the south side of the park. I think this is an appropriate location for the more dense zoning categories in the city. I don't think it's perfect. I was interested that Mr. Coffey noted that they would have liner buildings between any parking in the park, which I think is absolutely correct. One of my worries about the code was I wasn't sure it required that. I know we've got our frontage standards applicable to streets. I don't know if they apply on an interior lot line that's shared with a civic space. But I certainly hope that any development we get there does have that character. I'd hate to see any parking fronting on the park. We should sort of treat that as a frontage the same way we do along the roads, but I don't know if our code requires that. Anyway, I'm very comfortable moving forward with the petition.
Mr. Ackerman.
I agree with those two things here. One, this is we're changing land use, we're changing zoning. Neither of those is a development plan, and there will be ample opportunity to address that. Currently, quite frankly, I can't remember anybody except maybe at the university that's built a 14-story building in Gainesville. That's a pretty rare thing, and that may be economically viable. But the fact is, at the point that a development plan is brought forward, those issues can be addressed. I think this is actually a perfect place for this. I was originally in favor of transect zoning going down South Main, and the Stringfellows were among the fiercest opponents. of that, and we ended up dropping all of that area for transect zoning. At any rate, that said, I would be willing to make a motion, Madam Chair.
Okay, let's see if we have any other comments first, if that's okay. Anybody else want to speak to this before we have a motion?
Madam Chair, we do have, when you're ready, 2 public comments that were late breaking.
Okay, we'll go to public comment first then.
Excellent. Excuse me. First up, Sergio Quintana.
Yes, hello. Like I said, I'm Sergio Quintana. I live in Kirkwood neighborhood on South Main Street, and my house back southwest 16th Avenue. My concern mainly with this proposal is that the area between South Main and 6th Street on the east and west, and Depot and 16th, there's about 80 to 90 acres in that area. That's all industrial. And my concern is that if we convert all of that into the highest use housing, that we're going to kill the walkability and the very thing we're trying to create. So I do agree that that's a prime area for redevelopment, but I find it really hard to justify the types of heights that downtown and urban core allow for. I just don't feel like that's the type of densities we need there. Given that there's 80 other acres that if one of those parcels gets that kind of density, the rest is likely also to pursue those densities. So that's my main point. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Quintana. The next speaker, Betty, I'm going to mispronounce this and I apologize.
Yes, it's okay. It's quite all right. Oh, that's pretty good. Thank you so much, and thank you for allowing us to intervene. And I'm sorry I don't have written comments. I didn't know this meeting would be tonight. And I agree with my neighbor, Sergio Quintana. I actually attended the workshop. Mr. Coffey did not do a bad job at all. Thank you for representing our concerns. And the concern is primarily over the height and the scale, and the fact that we are concerned that it will metastasize. I think most of us would love to see a kind of 6-story, what you describe as, the transect retail, a place where you can walk. I mean, we love Depot. We don't want those. We don't want the industrial, setting. We're all on the same page. It is the concern primarily, that it will metastasize and it will become something very large, ugly, and as Sergio said, exactly the kind of thing that is unattractive. So thank you very much.
You, ma'am.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Bringing it back to the board, I just pulled up the table, and it does strike me there's a big change both in height and density between U9 and DT, more so than like the other categories. And I wonder if, regardless of how this petition goes tonight, if that's something that we need to look at, and if we need something between U9 and DT. I agree that the height is pretty intense, but we have DT zoning a lot of places, and we haven't seen 12 to 14-story buildings going in. I think we saw one 11-story building come to us for a special use permit, and I don't even remember if that was DT zoning or not. But I think there's a big jump there, and I think that I just hadn't noticed that before. I think it's something that we should look at. Maybe U9 needs to be bumped up a little bit. Maybe we need a category in between. I agree that this area, is ripe for transect zoning and redevelopment, and, 30 years from now, I think it's all gonna be transect zoned on South Main. It wasn't quite ready when we did the code change, and I think we're gonna see it kind of happening a little bit more piecemeal. This is just the first of many. The height worries me, but like I said, we aren't seeing these buildings actually coming through. They're just, the density really helps, and they don't necessarily go that high. So despite not liking the maximum height, I think there's issues that can be dealt with at the site plan level. And I do think we need to create opportunity for this to redevelop, and that increased density does give them that opportunity. So I'm inclined to support this petition, but with the note to staff, I think we need to look at the difference between U9 and DT. Maybe adjust U9, maybe add, a U10 or something in between, because the DT is pretty extreme. Mr. Blythe.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And again, just to be clear, the height is my main objection here. And just as a reference, U9 allowable is 88 feet at 6 stories. Goes up to a bonus of 116, 8 stories. DT is 172 by right, so it's literally twice as tall as a right. 200 bonus, so again, it's a 12 or 14 story. So I would also be a fan of something in the middle, that if you said economically U9 won't work, maybe there's like one more notch before we literally double the allowable height. So again, it's a good point with the.
Brittany, is that you?
I just wanted to add, I was actually just looking at our code referral list because I remembered a discussion about differences between DT and U9. So we do have on there, it's not about height, but we did have a referral to look at the density difference between DT and U9. So I think probably as a whole that needs to be looked at, that jump in all of those things.
Yeah, I looked at both density and height, and it's a big jump between those two for whatever reason. So
yeah, I think we could add that into that for sure.
That would be great. Mr. Hawkins.
Brittany said it.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Blythe.
Sorry, one more thing. Just as a reference, the Siegel building is about 130 feet to the rooftop, about 160 feet to the top of the architectural piece there of the bump up. So just as a reference compared to, again, I actually grew up in Orlando, so I do like Lake Eola. I love that feel. But just as a reference for folks in Gainesville, because oftentimes the Siegel building is used as kind of like, this is the tallest building I'm familiar with. It would add another 70 feet to that building. Just as a reference.
Okay, any other comments or a motion?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I'm not terribly concerned about it. I don't object to looking at, in the future, reviewing whether or not there should be an intermediate step between U9 and D2, but I think this is a good rezoning. Obviously, we still don't have, this is not attached to any kind of a development plan. So I would move that the plan board recommend approval of petition PD-21-14 LUC.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? Is that Mr. Hurst? Okay. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay. 2 noes. James and Sophia. Okay. With that, we'll go on to the next item,
The rezoning.
the related rezoning.
Yes, the next item, is petition PB 2115 ZON, David Coffey, agent for South Main LLC. Request to rezone the subject property from City of Gainesville I-2 to DT, located at 1015 South Main Street, related to PB 21-13 TCH and PB 21-14 LUC.
Mr. Calderon?
Madam Chair, good evening. Thank you. This petition is for the zoning portion of the requests on the subject parcels, and you can see them located here. By now, you're very familiar with the surrounding development and all of the issues related to the land use and the zoning. The request is to change it from I2 to DT. We've looked at the surrounding development and all of the characteristics, and we think that the proposal is going to be consistent with the trend that is portrayed in the Depot Park area. Proposal is for DT, downtown zoning. It meets the purpose of it is to implement the land use and take advantage of some of the development opportunities in the area. And again, Mr. Coffey and I did not talk about this, but I quoted Mr. King, who says that zoning laws regulate specific areas of land and it takes how they can be used. Without these regulations and incentives, many developers will continue to build where it is most cost effective, outside of the city and on the edge. And to take advantage of the opportunities we have, we recommend that this petition be approved. We looked at the criteria for granting a rezoning. They highlighted here compatibility of the permitted use, the character of the area, and we go on to I, and our recommendation is that it meets those requirements. The proposed T-zone shall provide additional characteristics, which we recommended in the text change. We believe that the proposed development will comply with these requirements, as well as 4 and 5, and our recommendation is for approval with a motion that the plan board forward a recommendation of approval to the City Commission. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Calderon. Any questions for staff on this item? Okay, seeing none.
I have a question.
Oh,
Do we
yeah,
have the
Mr.
opportunity to recommend something? I do find issue with some of the other points that have been expressed, that the height is going to be a concern. Because if you give them the opportunity to do it, it's most likely that they're going to notch that opportunity. Is there a way for us to amend the request for a lower, or I guess a less dense zoning designation, or is that?
So we can have that conversation. In the past, we've sent it back for sort of staff and the applicant to talk about that sometimes. Sometimes, you know, we could just deny the request. It may depend on what the applicant has to say, if they're open to a different category or not. It sounds like they feel like they need the most intense to make it commercially viable, but we can ask the applicant. And we cannot, you know, we could send it back to staff, and, you know, we've done that before when we felt like the zoning that comes to us doesn't quite fit, for discussion on what might be a better fit, or we can recommend denial. I think are our options. I don't know, Mr. Calderon, do you have other thoughts on that? Did you all have any conversations about different categories? Sounds like maybe not.
No, if we change it to the DT, we would have to go by the height. and the standards that are allowed in the DT. Like you said, the option of not moving forward with it or continuing it is an option. But as the applicant indicated, this is not a zoning that's going to happen immediately. And again, we believe that we have ways during development plan review of tempering those height restrictions. So we recommend approval of the petition.
Thank you, Mr.
Madam
Coleman.
Chair.
Yes, Mr. Coffey.
Just a couple of observations. First, the previous motion was recommending approval of urban core land use. There's only one zoning designation that can implement that land use, and that is DT. There are special district designations that could be applied, but under the code, section 30-4.2, it's made clear that only DT is the only eligible zoning for implementation. And I would just note also that just as we all rely on the market to ensure that there will be parking provided on development sites and have no parking required on any of the transect zones that I mentioned. I itemized them previously, and yet we know the parking does get provided because the market assures that it will happen. We also know from observation, many of you have noted it, that there is a significant amount of land area designated DT and has been for a long time now. And there are no structures being built that come anywhere near the 12 and potential of 14 stories. And that's the market that is determining that. In fact, the property that frames Depot Park on its northern edge is DT. And, you know, just as ripe for redevelopment as this site. And yet we don't see any tall buildings being built yet. So the reality is, and you can't rely on that. There's no way to assure it, but we do know from observation that the economics of the Gainesville market is not yet supporting development of properties at these building heights that are otherwise allowed. It's probably somewhere, as you may have considered it, between the U9 and DT heights that is the most that this market could handle at this time. And then just lastly, you know, if the decision were to go with U9, that then forces the owner to potentially reconsider pursuing the zoning change, because what it does is it puts the property owner in a position of having legal non-conforming uses once the land use and zoning takes effect, and economics that will not permit the redevelopment of the site in the manner in which we all would hope to see it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Coffey. So it sounds like the owner is not open to considering U9, is what I'm hearing.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, well, do we have anyone on the line for this item? Any public comment?
My apologies, Madam Chair. I was toggling it again. No, there's nobody on the line at this time. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Bringing it back to the board for discussion. For a motion,
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ackerman.
I move that the plan board approve petition PB-21-15ZON based on the testimony we've heard today.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Hawkins. All those in favor of approval, please say aye. Oh, yep, sorry.
I
Mr. Hawkins?
apologize. I could have said this earlier. I have to disclose an ex parte communication. The owner of one of the DT zone parcels on the north side of Depot Park, Greg Stats, called me to ask me not to vote for this item. And that was before I knew that it was on our agenda. So I wasn't able to end the conversation before hearing what he had to say. So I just wanted to disclose that on the record.
Okay. All right, then we'll go to a vote. Staff can make a note of that. All those in favor of approval, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say no.
No.
Okay, we may need to do a roll call vote on that one because I feel like it was a little bit different, Ms. McMullen.
All right. Hawkins?
Aye.
Newman?
No.
Ackerman?
Aye. Who did you call the first one?
Hawkins.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're stuck. The echoes in here are horrendous for my ears. Sorry.
No worries.
Give me 2 votes, though.
No worries. Sutton?
Aye.
Blythe?
No.
Hurst?
Aye.
Corrigetto?
No. Okay, so 4-3, I think.
Yes,
Our final
motion
count.
passes.
Okay, so it passes, and you'll see what the city commission has to say. Thank you, Mr. Calderon and Mr. Coffey. On to our last petition of the evening. Ms. McMullen, if you could read it into the record.
Yes. I'll go ahead and share my screen because I am doing this one. So this is petition PB-20-166 WSUP. WSD Engineering Inc. Agent approval of a wellfield special use permit to allow for the installation of a diesel generator for a cell tower in the tertiary wellfield zone located at 2498 Northwest 73rd Place. All right, so as I just said, this application is a request for approval of a wellfield special use permit to allow for the installation of a diesel generator at an existing cell tower, which is located in the tertiary wellfield zone. The property is located at 2498 Northwest 73rd Place. It has a land use of industrial and a zoning of general industrial. So the property is located in a wellfield zone. This is an overlay district that the city has. So the code states that all new and existing development within the primary, secondary, and tertiary wellfield protection zones shall first obtain a wellfield protection special use permit. So since this property is located in the tertiary wellfield zone, county and city environmental review is required in addition to approval by the city plan board. So the proposal is to install a diesel generator at this existing facility. There are 2 sets of review criteria that staff and the board are asked to review. The first is the set of review criteria that's the standard criteria for all special use permits. Some of these criteria are not going to be as applicable to this project as they are to others due to the scope of work. So I've kind of bolded the criteria here that are most important to focus on for this use. So the proposal is consistent with the Land Development Code and the Comp Plan. It meets the requirements of the Alachua County Hazardous Materials Management Code. And you'll hear a little bit more about that in the next set of criteria. And the city's comp plan requires that the County Hazardous Materials Management Code be the regulating document for this type of use. So the use will not adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. The improvements have been designed to meet requirements for preventing hazardous materials from entering the environment. Additionally, noise, glare, exterior lighting, or odor effects will not negatively impact surrounding properties. The generator is considered low noise and will be sound attenuated to reduce noise heard by workers at the site, as well as from neighboring properties, which are all of the neighboring properties surrounding are industrial as well. And the applicant can provide more information on that if you're interested. And special requirements of the Land Development Code have been met. That goes back to compliance with the county's management code. So in addition to the standard special use criteria, because the property is located in a well-filled zone, the code asks for further information on how the use will impact environmental considerations given the nature of the use. So Liliana Kuluri, our city's environmental coordinator, is here with us to provide information on how the application complies with this section of the code.
Thanks, Brittany. So as you can see here, there's 7 criteria that the permit has to meet. I just wanted to mention a few things about some of these items. Regarding criteria 2, that the proposed use won't endanger the city's potable water supply. I do want to point out that the application meets the requirements of the Alachua County Hazardous Materials Management Code, and they provide a secondary contained or double-walled tank with 110 to 130% minimum capacity, which basically serves a purpose to prevent hazardous materials from leaking into the environment by capturing the entire contents of the primary containment in the secondary containment if there's ever a leak or spill. Regarding the criteria for public utilities, this site does have electric service, but it does not have water or wastewater service. However, because it's a cell tower, those services aren't really necessary. The applicant has indicated that there are no wells or septic tanks at the site. There is no proposed underground storage of any petroleum products or hazardous materials. All storage is going to be above ground. Alachua County has reviewed this application for compliance and recommends approval, and there are no significant environmental features at this property.
Thank you, Lily.
Great, thanks. So with that, staff recommends approval of the petition, and we're here for any questions you may have, and I believe that the applicant is on the line as well.
Okay. First, are there any questions for staff on this petition? Okay, not seeing any. If the applicant is on the Zoom or on the phone, we can go over to them.
No, ma'am, there are no callers at this time. The floor is yours.
Okay. Are they on the Zoom, Brittany? Do you know?
I believe the applicants should be on the Zoom call. Let me see. We may need for the meeting host to move them over to the panelist list. I think they're currently under attendees.
Okay, we'll wait just a minute.
Hi, Brittany, this is Elizabeth. I have moved one of the applicants, but there is a member, it says WSD. I'm not sure what item they're here for.
Yeah, I think that is the applicant as well.
Okay, I will promote them now.
Thank you. Okay, so applicants, if you're on the line, not sure if you have a presentation to share, but feel free to add anything that you would like at this point.
You hearing me? You should have permission to share your screen or be on camera at this point if you're a panelist. Make sure you're not on mute. I don't know if you can see Brittany if they're...
Hi, are you hearing me?
Oh yes, now we can hear you.
Oh, great. Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Navarro and I'm with WSD, and I recommend approving the permit, the special use permit, and I am in agreement that our generator will not cause any damage or any spillage because of the safety securities we have implemented with the generator. So want to say thank you and hope that the permit can be approved.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Navarro. Are there any questions for the applicant? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for comment or a motion. We already checked the phones, right? Do we have anyone on the phone for a public comment?
There's no public comment at this time, Madam Chair.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, back to the board. Mr. Newman,
I move to approve petition PB-20-166 WSUP.
Second. A second by Mr. Hawkins. All of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. That was the last item on our agenda. Unless we have someone on the phone, we'll skip the public comment. Do we have anyone else on the phone?
Madam Chair, still nobody on the phone.
Okay, great. Any member comments? Or is everyone tired? Our next meeting date
I
is
do
not
remember comments,
listed
Madam Chair.
here. Do you know what it is?
Thomas,
Oh,
Thomas
Mr.
has a
Hawkins, go
comment.
ahead.
Thank you. I'm actually going to comment on the meeting that we're trying to schedule in April.
Okay.
I had two thoughts to share. One, staff suggested moving our time up to perhaps 5:30. I will do my best to be in attendance whatever time we set it, but before 6:30 is super tough just in my household for childcare. So I'd prefer we either keep the 6:30 time, or I will suggest something novel during the workday, if that works for other folks. No? All right. Perhaps that gets a veto from the chair.
We
But
don't
I
all
still
have
had
the
to throw it out there.
flexibility of the university employee at the table.
All right, say Levy.
Okay, but
I will echo the 6:30 being a little bit easier.
Okay.
That gives me the chance to at least like go home and see my kids for 10 minutes before I come here.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I will change it to 6:30.
Okay, great. And then our next meeting date, I believe, is on the 22nd.
Yes,
And Brittany will
sorry, April
confirm the
22nd.
workshop date and time via email. And I don't know, I know you told a couple of people early on about the city's email issues with some kind of new blocking thing. Just if any of you have been trying to email staff, it may have been blocked inadvertently. So be aware of that if you're trying to communicate with city staff via email.
Yeah, I'm gonna be, IT implemented a new, mail quarantine system that they send a report to us the day after of the emails that we didn't get the day before. So that's kind of, we're working through that, but just FYI, if you don't hear back right away, that may be why, but we're working on fixing that, so.
Great. Thank you all. We'll adjourn this meeting and see you all next month.